If everyone will get seated, we'll try to get started here. I'd like to call the Administration and Finance Committee to order. We can begin with a roll call.
Dr. Beebe? Present. Dr. Beebe's present. Ms. Bofi? Here. Ms. Bofi's present. Ms. Bradford? Here. Ms. Bradford's present. Mr. Garvey? Here. Mr. Garvey's present. Mr. Gio? Mr. Gio is not present. Ms. Hill? Present. Ms. Hill is present. Mr. Lee? Here. Mr. Lee is present. Dr. Moranti? Present. Dr. Moranti is present. Ms. Orange Jones? Ms. Orange Jones is not present. Mr. Romer?
Here.
Mr. Romer is present. Ms. Smith? Here. Ms. Smith is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. You can begin with the agenda.
The consent agenda is ready for approval, adding item 7.1, but pulling items 2.2, 3.1, 6.3, and 8.1 due to public comment.
A motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second? Second. There's a second. Any objection? Hearing none? None. Next item.
On page 3, consideration of LDE contracts of $50,000 and under approved by the State Superintendent of Education. The recommendation is to receive.
So moved.
There's a motion to receive. And there's a second. Did someone request this to be pulled, or we just have a comment card?
Yep.
We'll go to comment card, and then if anybody has a question, we can follow it. Lee Barrios?
Lee Barrios, retired teacher, St. Tammany. As you know, I always
Ms.
get
Barrios,
up.
I'm not. Double check your microphone. I'm not certain if it's
Hello.
on.
I'm
Yeah,
usually
okay.
pretty loud.
No, it is.
But I can be louder. As you know, I always come up and question some of these contracts. Of course, you won't answer questions, but two comments basically. One is, what does personnel at the Department of Education do when so many of these contracts are for things that it seems like your personnel should be doing? And my second point is that $20 an hour for summer interns, please, I don't get that. I don't understand why you need so many summer interns and why they're being paid so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments on this item? There is a motion. Is there any objection to the motion?
I'd like to have comments.
Yes, Dr. Beebe.
Okay, and we are on
2.2 on
2.2.
page 3. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There was one regarding the MK Partners.
And can you make
Yeah,
sure?
sort of the MK Partners Inc. contractor will develop and implement customer relationship management solution that will enable the Office of Portfolio to efficiently conduct charter school oversight as required by Louisiana's charter school law. So why is it necessary to pay someone to conduct this oversight when we have a recovery school district administration?
Do you mind pointing to the?
If I'm on page 6.
Okay.
The contract amount is $9,900.
Yes. I don't know if someone from the department
Are
wants
you
to.
with me?
Yes, I'm with you. Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know if someone from the
I
department.
just want some clarification as to why we need additional oversight. And I understand it says as required by Louisiana's charter school law. But again, I think Ms. Barrios made a very legitimate observation. It's that, you know, why do we need to continuously hire others when we have a staff at the department? Or that we have staff, for example, referencing the RSD. I'm just curious.
Superintendent, does anybody from the department want to address that one?
We can certainly speak to it. This is a contract to supplement a $250,000 a year contract that provides a service to oversee and review the charters. That is an organization called Schoolworks. This is I believe, a roughly $9,000 a year contract. It is to supplement, I don't have on hand the functions that this $9,000 a year service plays with respect to Schoolworks, but we will certainly have it right back to you.
Okay, Superintendent White, and I have another question regarding Stoney Associates LLC to conduct and qualify scenarios analysis for potential child care assistant program, CCAP policy changes that will result in more equitable funding to support high-quality outcomes. What is the intent of that contract? What is the objective?
The Department of Education, as you know, is bringing over the Child Care Assistance Program federal fund into the agency as of October 1st. We are effectively trying to figure out across thousands of kids birth to 5, what is the way in which those funds that we are now newly responsible for can be allocated when matched with other funding streams so as to ensure the appropriate size of the subsidy for the appropriate number of students. We have a feeling that there are some inefficiencies in the way those dollars are used today. This is a consultant to assist us in that financial analysis.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask, because it came to mind, with the most recent report that the governor's office restricted expenditures to $2,000, can you explain the process?
Just a quick word, by the way. The MK assisting of Schoolworks is on financial issues, just to clarify that.
Okay.
Secondly, the governor's contracting, the new regulation that they passed down, is not actually about a limit on the size of contracts. It's about the extent to which a contract at a certain dollar amount has to pass through a specific threshold. Under $20,000 previously had to pass your approval. It didn't have to pass through the specific procurement process of the Office of Contractual Review. Now it does, unless it's under $2,000. It's not to say that it can't be approved or won't be approved. It's just to say that it has to pass through that additional hurdle now.
So once we approve, then it will go to the Division of Administration to
That's
review?
correct. That's correct, as it always has. But previously, under $20,000, it didn't require them to do their formal process again.
Okay.
Thank you. So we just received the 50,000 and under, and that will now go to contractual review?
Yes.
Okay, if it's over 2,000.
Yes.
Could we just have a little bit more explanation on the summer interns? I just would like to know, did it actually begin 6/9/14, and when did it end? How many did we actually have? I'm trying to look through and pull it out.
We can get the exact number. I believe it was roughly at 15 summer interns. It did begin in the middle of June. I don't have the exact date offhand, but if it says, I trust that what it says here is the accurate date. And for some of them, it has already ended. For some of them, it will end later in August.
Any other questions? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
On page 29, item 3.1, consideration of audit reports. Recommendation is to receive.
Motion to, can I have a motion to receive?
So moved.
There's a motion to receive and a second, and there's a second. Ms. Bradford. We do have comments cards. I don't know if anybody else has a question at this moment, or we'll go to comments and then questions. Lee Barrios.
Since I can't ask questions, I'll pass.
Okay. You certainly, you can make your questions on the record, and if you'd like a response, you certainly can ask for that.
Right, and also, I don't get that, so
Okay.
I'm going to hope that you all will ask me the questions.
Okay. I'll give Ms. Girardelli a chance to summarize.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. First of all, let me apologize for my dress. My daughter's about to have her child. We've had several false alarms, including one at 3 a.m. this morning. So the good news is I'm here. The bad news is I just threw on whatever was available when I
Well, I would
left.
say you look better than normal, but I don't know what that.
Thank you.
All right.
I don't know if that's saying a lot, but thank you very much, Mr. Romer. As you know, I think I spoke briefly about this at the last board meeting. Every year when the school board reports start coming in, we review them in internal audit as a means of tracking, especially for federal findings, because as you know, federal findings could involve return of money to the federal government if they're not resolved in accordance with federal regulations. Internal audit's job is to review the reports and enter the reports and findings into our database that we keep, that's available for Linda Tyndall's section, the Federal Resolutions section, to ensure that those findings are resolved. And as part of this, every year I produce a report that contains this is only a fraction of the findings, but these are the ones that I consider to be significant. And many items that are findings are there just because the CPA is required to report them that way. That doesn't mean that there's actually a real problem. These are the things that I find are more significant. For instance, a timely audit report, a failure to have the report submitted within 6 months as required by state law. Donation or misuse of public funds, situations like that. So if you have any questions about any of these, I'll be glad to answer them for you at this time.
Ms. Giardell, if you don't mind me asking, Dr. Beebe.
Yes, sir. There's a district that even last year it was brought to our attention that they're paying, as I understand it, insurance premiums. And so what steps are taken to ensure that this deficit doesn't continue?
Dr. Beebe, I'd love to answer that question, but that's not actually our function. I'm kind of like the traffic cop. I just write the ticket. You know, as to how it's going to be resolved or who's going to be responsible for that, that's either programs themselves or even you, the board, in some situations.
Ms. Bradford.
For you.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I'll let him finish first and then I'll ask.
Okay.
I'm finished as far as I'm concerned.
So who is going to do the oversight? Superintendent?
I think it depends on.
It really depends on the issue. On many of these, for example, there are school systems that are already in financial dialogue, for example, with the Department's Office of Finance. On others, there are specific federal requirements, as the auditor mentions, that if there's a finding, it can be referred to the federal government and they do their oversight.
Somewhere we do have a report with that information from either the agency or from the school or from somewhere addressing this issue?
Addressing which specific issue?
Whatever their audit finding was.
I think it really depends. On some of these issues, you're talking about, is there a report beyond what
When
Mr.
it's
Gardell
the
is
second
reporting?
year of the same finding, third year of the same finding, yes, I have a problem with that.
Whether it's been referred to the finance office, if it has been, then they've followed up and there is a report on that. If it's a federal issue, if they've chosen to investigate, then there's a finding on that.
Ms. Bradford, I think
I'd be happy to talk through, Ms. Bradford, the specific issues, issue by issue.
Sure, I understand, but to me, we've already identified the specific issue and repeated the specific issue.
Which one are you referring to?
Well, I'm being a generalist. I'm just talking in general about these, their second and third consecutive findings. I'm not talking about any one specific. I'm just talking about, I know that as a school leader, we have a problem in my school, we have to make a plan, and we have to decide how we're going to solve it. And so I want to know, have these schools, districts, whatever, made a plan to address and fix the issue? In my mind, I have to think that's an easy answer, and they should have. I know that may not be you, and you may not know that answer, but I certainly want us to find out that answer. And in fact, I'd kind of like to see if it's a third finding what the answer, solution,
What the consequences.
preparation is going to be, and what the consequences will be. I mean, can they just forever have this audit finding and not fix it? I guess I'm asking you.
Ms. Bradford, I think in the case of federal findings, we have a federal resolution section that Linda Tyndall is the head of, and they do an excellent job of following up on federal findings. Now, sometimes some of these findings, the second findings, is basically, it's kind of a matter of timing. Perhaps the finding was originally cited at the end of the previous year, and so you've got a timing situation where before they can actually correct it, you're into another fiscal year, so the CPA is required to report again. Now, on the third finding, that's another matter.
Well, and I also realize that on some issues that it is not, it's maybe not as, I don't want to say a minor thing, but a thing that is not readily having to be resolved. But somebody somewhere ought to know that, and I don't really have to be the person that does know that. But I need to have assurances that you know that, or whoever is the person that needs to know it knows that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We have documented reports on every single one of these issues, I will say, other than the St. Landry issue. And the reason that I call that out is that issue is actually not in the domain of education policy and that kind of our realm. So I'm happy to provide we can compile the reports, Bridget, that speak to each of these issues, and we can provide the detail to the board.
Yeah. What I just need would be a report. I don't have to, there's no need to produce a document, but I do want a report that can say, if I say, what is St. Landry doing, somebody can give me an answer.
Got it. Okay. Yep.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this question again, along the lines with Ms. Bradford, if it's a fifth consecutive finding, that has got to raise a red flag. A fifth consecutive finding may not be it may be school activity funds, but that's a big deal. Fifth consecutive finding.
Yes, ma'am. I agree. But again, I do not have the power to make that correction. Some of that is, in fact, going to fall on the board to bring pressure on these systems. I think when you start getting into multiple findings, sometimes the board's got to step up and talk to the superintendents about these things. There's only so much, in defense of the department, there's only so much the department can do. At some point, there's got to be pressure from some other avenue to, bring that into line.
Do most of these systems that are cited have internal auditors?
Not always, no ma'am. Many of the smaller systems do not.
So who do they rely on?
The CPA generally.
They need to get a new one in some cases. I'm concerned about 5 consecutive findings in the same place, 3 and 4, and then public bid law twice in one area. I guess as a new member.
Which one are we speaking to specifically?
Page 34, school activity funds, there's a 5th consecutive finding for a parish. I mean, at some point, hey.
School activity funds have been forever a problem, and the reason is pretty simple. Each school has their I'm sure every one of you here, if you have kids, they've raised money for the school. Well, what do you have at the school? You've got the superintendent and the secretary, and that's probably who's taking care of everything. And, of course, there's no real internal control there under that situation. School's small, and if the system doesn't have an internal auditor, then it just gets out of hand sometimes. Yes, ma'am.
And I think that maybe the board is charged, or maybe somebody's got to be charged with, if that situation exists and it's 5 times, that sends up a flag that there certainly could be cause for concern. Mm-hmm. If the same 2 people are handling all of the funds and they've had 5 violations, I can see that as serious.
So it's, again, at some point, pressure's got to come from somewhere else. It's very simple.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Lee.
I'm of the impression that there is communication from the department to the school systems, and that's
On federal, I know certainly on federal matters, yes, absolutely.
I'm not talking federal. I'm talking these third, fourth, and fifth repeats. The conversation between the department and the school system, wouldn't that be considered pressure?
Yes, yes, sir.
If I can just say, you receive reports on an annual basis as to the status of what Mr. Lee is describing. And you'll recall we walk through these discussions where we talk about which stage of the dialogue is each group in. It's also, though, fair to say that the school board is the legally established body for overseeing and ensuring that that those agencies comply. And so while this report is being done by the state per the law, actually the fiduciary responsibilities rest with that governing body. That's not to say we can't bring more pressure and so on, but it is to say that everything that Mr. Lee discusses is followed here, and we enter into a state of fiscal dialogue. Now, there have been points, as happened in St. Landry, Beth, whenever that was, 3 years ago, where we have districts that are perpetually operating from a deficit, or there are issues of real malfeasance, and we may need to make recommendations to the Attorney General that are as aggressive as a fiscal monitor being appointed, and we've been in that position before. But that is after multiple violations of a serious level. These are more findings where, through a transparent process, we tell the school board it's time to correct this. If you have, we can certainly provide a report as to where all these are currently in process.
Well,
Ms. Bradford?
I would say that it doesn't need to be, I mean, like third and up, maybe, yes, we just need to know. You're right, it is the school board's responsibility, and we don't exercise much control over the school board. However, it does come back to us, obviously, in the audit, and therefore we do have a responsibility to be sure that we've asked the school board what they're doing, or inform them, or whatever it needs to be. And secondly, that we do look what help we might give to them or give to the district, because the districts are under our responsibility to help correct these issues, because I think that if they think nobody's looking, and it's hard to look at everything, this is now in the spotlight, and I would appreciate if we could address that from that perspective.
Ms. Bradford, also too, if you look in the report, underneath each of these, I put a small blurb. There's a paragraph or a small section that talks about what they've said they're going to do to correct it. Now, that's...
I just want to know who's looking to see that they did it.
Ma'am.
Any further comment or question? Yes, Ms.
Just one more comment. I did read that section, and one of the schools that had a fifth consecutive finding just says it's not economically feasible to hire additional staff. I think that's, at some point, it's time for us to ask the school boards to make sure that they're doing what they need to do. And I don't know that the good answer is, well, we can't, it's not economically feasible for us to do what we need to do to be in compliance with the audit.
Yes, ma'am. That's, fortunately, I don't have to worry about that. I just report to you.
That's unfortunate.
Appreciate everybody's comments. Appreciate your presentation. No further comments? Any objection to receiving the report? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
On page 37, item 4.1, consideration of 8G funding cycle activities, approval of 8G statewide programs for fiscal year 2014-2015. The recommendation is to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second. I'm going to allow, if you want to quickly present, that'd be great. And then we do have some comment cards.
We have today on page 37 just summaries of the last four. Oh, I'm sorry. Kim Trippo, BESE staff. We have on page 37 the summary of the last 4 8G statewide programs that are up for approval for 14-15. They're all coming from the special school district. You know, if there are any comments or concerns,
Okay.
you can take them at this time.
Thank you. We'll have a couple comment cards, and then I'll see if board members have comment. Lee Barrios? Okay. Deborah Moe? I think, oh.
Deborah Moe, representing LAE. Earlier this morning, I talked about the HE grants, and the statewide grant is one of the 3 areas that grants can be placed, or money can be placed in. I'm hoping that, and I've been trying to pull up my Wi-Fi and it won't come up, I'm hoping that the statewide grants will be looked at as a further way that our pre-K, our 4-year-old program, can be enhanced. We have a number of kids in this state that are on waiting lists in order to be placed into pre-K programs. I believe that no child should have to wait. No parent should have to put their child on a waiting list. If they desire to have the services rendered to their child through the state program, this is something that I believe the state should make every effort to accommodate. And I'm hoping that the statewide grants can be used to supplement the block grants as well. The competitive grants, I understand, are important for innovation, but with the scarcity of funds, I really do believe that we need to work as diligently as possible to place as much funding in our pre-K programs. That is the key to our kids doing well in their later school years. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other public comments. Do any board members have a question or comment on this item?
I want to ask a
Yes,
question.
Mr. Lee.
There are 4 items listed here on page 37. Are these repetitive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any objection to approving this item? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
On page 70, item 5.1, consideration of federal, state grants and allocations to LEAs, Type 2 charters, Type 5 charters, approved non-public schools, and community-based organizations. The recommendation is to approve.
Can I have a motion to approve? There's a motion to approve by Ms. Bradford, seconded by Ms. Bophy. We do have comment cards. I'll go to comments first and then allow board members questions if they would like. Lee Barrios.
Lee Barrios, retired teacher, St. Tammany. I just have, I guess it'll be a comment, not a question, but for one of the grants, it's for the RSD High Schools Initiative, and it says to help support the successful transition of students with disabilities at RSD direct-run high schools closing or closed in June to higher performing schools for the 14-15 school year. And I'm just curious as to, what are the assurances and what is the possibility that these students will, in fact, there will be openings for these students and they can be guaranteed to be put into a higher performing school since there are so few of those anyway in the RSD. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have a question for Ms. What page are you
Carolyn?
on?
Ms. Hill?
77.
Those students have already transferred, and I believe all of them ended up in a higher performing school, and 80% ended up in a school rated A, B, or C.
Is it Ms. Hill? Okay. Karen Harper Royal?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a few questions about this item. The item is very vague on the agenda. What is the program that's going to receive this $200,000? And if the students are at different schools, how is this money being administered? While I'm all for supporting students, it's just I'm just really curious, how are you using a therapeutic program if they're at A, B, you said they're at 80% of the students are at A, B, and C schools? Did you include C in that?
We did.
Okay, so if there are different schools, do all of those schools have a therapeutic program? Is this money to hire support staff, paraeducators? Or is there a specific program run by an entity that's going to follow these students? There's just no other information about how this money is being used.
These were grants made to these schools to serve students who are in advanced grades. So these are older kids, many of them overaged, at the receiving sites. IDEA funds targeted towards serving these specific kids through staffing and professional development.
So this is from IDEA funds?
Correct.
So basically, it's almost like money following students individually, so maybe depending on what those students' individual needs are at whatever school they ended up in.
Yes, and it was given to expand programs that already exist in the receiving schools to serve students with significant disabilities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There are no other public comment cards on this item. Do any board members have a question or a comment? Is there any objection? Ms. Bophy.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here and, things that we could talk about at the schools for a long time. But the one that I would like information back on that I think the board would benefit from knowing is how the program goes in St. John Parish, where you're looking at, with a special education allocation of $49,000. So just a follow-up with the board to let us know how things go with that award.
We will.
Any other comment? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
On page 85, item 5.2, consideration of LDE contracts and leases of $50,000 and over. The recommendation is to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Bophy, second by Ms. Bradford. We do have comment cards. I'll go first to comment cards and then see if members have a question. Ms. Barrios. There are no other comment cards on this. Does any board members have a question or a comment? Does anybody object? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
On page 88, item 6.1, consideration of approval of the 2014-2015 budget for the Recovery School District. The recommendation is to approve.
Can I have a motion to approve? A motion by Ms. Bradford.
Second.
Second by Ms. Bophy. Superintendent, do you want to?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Superintendent Dobar to present this item.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, good morning. Patrick Dobar, Superintendent, Louisiana Recovery School District. Members, you have before you the exact same budget information that we submitted to you in June. And so we're just coming today just seeking final approval of the budget. I'm happy to answer any questions. All of the information is exactly the same that we presented to you in June.
Ms. Hill.
Could you please explain the personal services and what does that entail? Because of what I'm looking at, this $8 million. So could you explain on page 89?
I'm sorry.
Line item where it says the total personal services.
Let me just take a look at it.
Ms. Hill, what page did you say?
Page 89.
Yeah, let me get the packet. Just give me 1 second to get the full packet on it. And it speaks to which?
The total personal services. So could you explain in more detail what does that entail? Personal services such as?
Okay.
Like what's the funding used for?
Right, that's salary. So it's categorized as per the finance office. It's personal services, but that's salary.
So there's all the salaries for
Yes,
all
ma'am.
of the. So to my understanding, in New Orleans, all of the schools are all of the schools are chartered now.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. And we only have technically an EBR, maybe six schools that's under the recovery school district.
We have 7.
Okay, 7
Yeah.
schools. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just trying to figure out why do we have this amount of funding? Because that means that we only have an administrative team. We don't have
Absolutely. And we can
any
talk.
teachers. We don't have any, paraprofessionals. What it takes to run a school. So I'm trying to figure out why.
Yes, and I can speak to that again. And so for 14-15 school year, we have 92 full-time staff, and we had over the summer 130 closeout staff. And so the 92 full-time staff includes 33 persons working at our Early Learning Center and Community Early Intervention Program in New Orleans. So we're still running that program. A majority of staff. Our other central office staff is the charter facilities, the enrollment team, which is over 10 people, school facility master plan team, my office, and then welfare and attendance. And so that's the total line of work and the total number of employees that we have working throughout the organization. So even without direct run schools, which that number reduced for the 13-15 school year, we had 568 staff when you consider teachers and all those that were in all our buildings. That led to a $78 million budget for staffing, down to now just 92 full-time staff, again, with 130 closeouts. So we still have people on payroll that's doing closeout from summer school and just transition of facilities and a number of things, down to $8.6 million.
Okay, so for the child welfare and attendance, why not the charter schools responsible for their own child welfare and attendance component? Why?
Well, there's still monitoring that we do, and then we still also have responsibilities within the governance structure of Orleans Parish.
Okay, and for the oversight of the facilities, the reason why we have staff there, because their job is to assure that the facilities are being kept up.
Yes, the monitoring and also the charters within the charter school compacts that we have to make sure we're doing deferred maintenance properly. We have staff that go out and regularly monitor that on a biannual basis, submit reports on the facility use, the lease agreements that we have with that.
Well, there's a particular school, and I don't know if we made reference to, when we had our last meeting, that they have foundation problems.
Yes, ma'am.
So I hope you guys.
We've already addressed that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
We do have comment cards. I'll go to comments and then come back again to board members if you have additional questions. Lee Barrios. Karen Harper Royal.
I just have a couple of questions on the Recovery School District budget. Will there still be an office in New Orleans? Will the Recovery School District continue to administer the one app process? And at what point does the Recovery School District's functions just kind of roll over into simply just being a department of the Louisiana Department of Education?
On the first question, if you would answer that one, Superintendent. The second question is kind of a larger, ongoing question, but I certainly appreciate it. Do you mind?
Yes, I don't mind. Not
question?
at all. No. And so, no, we will continue to have a central office in New Orleans. And we will continue to manage the one app process in conjunction with OPSB as we're doing. Right now, we're with the working group at OPSB, establishing what we're going to do, a calendar and everything for next year. And I believe we also have a group that we're meeting with you, Karen, I believe next week or week after. Know that we got calendar to take your input on the one app process. So yes, we're going to continue to do those things.
Okay. But will there come a day when RSD kind of rolls into just a lot of those functions being a part of the administration of LDOE?
Right now, the law provides for the structure, and that's why that structure still exists. So, there'd have to be a modification to that law for that to be changed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Frank Buckley.
Good morning. My name is Frank Buckley. The concerns I have about the budget, I don't know how much Patrick is making, but the question was asked about what does he do, and he said one of the things was oversight. RSD would be having, his position would be oversight. So there were some things that happened under the RSD that he should have had oversight in, but he acted like he never knew it happened. For example, Jacobs Construction. The project manager for the Recovery School District was allowed to do business in the state of Louisiana from 2007 to 2010 without being licensed. Okay, another one, Jacobs Construction was being paid for work that he did not complete. All this stuff is under oversight. KIP employee embezzled $70,000. Parents having to come to BESE at Lake Area, a couple of weeks ago, to get their kids enrolled all their kids enrolled in the same school. Steve Barr, the Futures Now CEO at John McDonald, told us that he was working for free. And then you get a 990 that states that he was getting $250,000 a year for 40 hours of work a week, and he didn't even spend 40 hours a week in New Orleans. Gillian Stein was making $150,000 a year on Futures Now board for 20 hours a week, and he wasn't in New Orleans for 20 hours a week. And I'm talking about oversight. When I mentioned Andrew J. Bell to Patrick back in May, and so they was talking about converting it to apartments, and Andrew J. Bell was a junior high school that has a football field, a basketball gym, a place for tennis courts, and they're going to convert it to apartments while we still have kids in New Orleans attending school in trailers. I'm not understanding that. You know, why don't we put all our kids in buildings before we start turning the buildings over to become apartments? And this is oversight. You know, this is what we paying Patrick for, oversight. And all this stuff is happening under his watch. And when I bring it to his attention, he act like I'm giving him a surprise. Or it's my fault that I'm telling him that Andrew J. Bell is becoming apartments. That's something he should know as far as oversight. In 2013, John White said he had a $400 million surplus of money to pay for the voucher programs because it was an overestimating cost of the buildings in New Orleans. 2014, they come out with $330 million in the hole. Now they're saying we $118 million cut. We got to cut back, and all the buildings not going to get built. So how did you go from $10 billion to renovate schools, and then one year you're saying you have $400 million surplus, and then you come back the following year, you say you're $330 million in the hole. Then you come back a few months later and say we're going to have to cut back $118 billion. So some schools will not get built. And we're saying why? We still have kids in trailers. Why KIPP School are getting all the new buildings? They leave McNair and they're moving into another Benjamin Banneker, and they're going to use McNair as swing space. We have parents in New Orleans trying to get their kids out of the recovery school district. Orleans Parish School Board doesn't have enough seats in their district. So why, when a charter operator decides to move out of a school building, that school building becomes swing space instead of a building?
If I could ask you to wrap it up.
Okay, instead of that building going back to Orleans Parish School Board and give parents in New Orleans a real choice to get out of the recovery school district. And again, everything I mentioned, you know I have the documentation for, and I'm asking, we're paying Patrick Dobar, and one of the things he said that did RSD, his job is to do oversight. But there's a lot of money and a lot of things that are going on that he's missing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Shawan Bernard.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just briefly, as we get into the RSD and its oversight, $213 million is a lot of money to invest in an arm that BESE can take back some of its responsibilities, and you can also give back some of the responsibilities to the local LEA. Orleans Parish, with the collaborative endeavor, does not need as much support perhaps as RSD would like to give with the truancy, with the therapy, with the App One. It's time to give back some of that money that can go into classrooms. Look at the big picture. As a classroom teacher, we can use $213 million to implement the Common Core and perhaps buy the tests that you all need to buy that the governor, won't pay for. But some of that money can come from RSD. It's had its purpose. It served its purpose. We thank you all for helping us out in Orleans Parish. But we have to look at it, and you need to be fiscally responsible. $213 million is a lot of money to invest in an arm of your government, of your responsibilities, and some of that money can go back into the classrooms. We don't perhaps need everything that RSD is saying that it's providing. What it's doing is crafting out and keeping their jobs and making sure that some people stay employed. But we're asking you all to look closely at that budget, see what's necessary, see what can be given back to local control, and allow the local boards to do what they need to do. Orleans Parish is doing a great job right now in terms of the schools that it has and that it's managing, and it perhaps does not need all of the truancy therapy App 1. We've created a monster. It's out of control in terms of the spending, $213 million. It's a lot. So if you can look at that and give some of those responsibilities back to the local boards and some of that monies back to the classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. That concludes the comment cards on this item. Do any board members have a question? Dr. Beebe.
Yes, having listened to the report provided by our auditor and the response offered to those deficits within school systems, in essence, you know, we really don't have any control over those decisions made within the school systems as it was conveyed. I would have to ask the question, why do we need continued oversight? What oversight is given to schools that have local governance, charter management operators? So I just don't, I agree with the previous speakers here. You know, why do we need to continue to invest in oversight, and do we have true oversight? So I guess the question
I'd be happy to answer that.
Superintendent Dobort, what oversight are you providing?
Absolutely. So, and I think, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond to that. It's not simply just oversight. I believe the person who spoke took one phase, one part of what we do, because oversight is also within the Department of Education. And so we make certain that charters are functioning properly and give them that necessary support. But the majority of our work also is around continuing to ensure equity for all kids. And I'll give you specifically the things that we talked about in June. Around enrollment, we have our one app system, which we've gotten to almost where all of the schools in Orleans Parish, minus a few charter schools that are still under their charge, to enter into our central enrollment system. Again, to make sure that we're serving all kids and not just our hardest to serve kids within the city. We have our family resource centers, our student hearing office. So we're still responsible from the RSD's perspective to ensure that we have fair hearings for all of our schools. In OPSB schools, as well as all RSD schools, use our hearing office. And so the city has agreed, and we're running and managing that. Strategic coordination that we're doing from the RSD's perspective around special ed programs, our New Orleans Early Education Pilot Program that we have, the Korean Technical Education Program. And particularly in the areas of equity, we have a differentiated funding model that we're working on not only with Type 5 charters, but all of the charter schools in New Orleans and the direct run schools, where we just had a convening of all operators. There was no conversation around governance, around who's managing or running. It was about the fact that we need a better funding model for all of our special needs kids, and we're helping to lead that work in that area, as well as creation and the opening of our Youth Opportunity Center to serve our chronically absent students, again, in conjunction with not only RSD schools, but all schools in New Orleans, as well as, again, as I mentioned, enrollment. We have the Jumpstart Initiative with the state that we're helping to work, CTE programs. There's a discussion around millage and the long-term deferred maintenance, in which we're being a supportive partner with OPSB on, as well as the business industry, to ensure that we get to move forward with this, to make certain that we stabilize and have our buildings in great shape, not only now, but 50 to 100 years from now. And we also are continuing to work with our charters that we have on a number of areas. So we look at our responsibility is still around renewal and extension of charters. How do we continue to raise the bar to make certain that the academic performance that we've had over the last 6 to 7 years continues to go forward? We also have areas around discipline, where we've been working in conjunction with our operators in community, as well as under the leadership of Ms. Kira Orange-Jones, to discuss those areas of not only improving the way we function around expulsions, but the way we function around suspensions and how we discipline our students in schools. Again, mindful of autonomy, but also supportive of being that government entity and playing a role to ensure equity and fairness for all of our families. Also, we're working again with OPSB, the Cooperative Endeavor Agreement, which was referenced, the facility planning. And lastly, I'll just put, and probably as important as anything else, is the area just around working with our schools on the innovation. So we have some schools, Ash Charter for one example, who's just recognized nationally for their blended learning model. How do we get them to replicate or even share with other operators to get that type of growth? And that's just a few of the things. that I can speak specifically to that's driving the work this year, but also showing the need and what we have to do. And so it's not just oversight. It is way more than oversight, but oversight is a part of it. And so I just wanted to, again, just share with you those things. I know I've shared that with you on the last meeting and other times before, but I just want to continue to have you understand. And then not only that, just the work in Baton Rouge with our schools that we just ramped up. We just started those schools in the Achievement Zone this week, and we're going to continue to grow and hopefully have great schools in Baton Rouge, as well as the agreement and work that we have in other parts of the state. And so hopefully that clears up as to what we're doing and the value. And we listen to our state superintendent and you, the board, as we continue to shape out those areas where we can be most helpful.
Superintendent Dilbord, so with these, perhaps then I'm not clear on the charter management. Or aren't they paid an administrative fee to ensure that accountability is in place at the various charter schools?
I'm not sure I understand. They're paid an administrative fee. There's an administrative fee that the state and the RSD we receive from charters for various things. But yes, the operators are responsible like any LEA. And so we want to make certain that we're there like a school district. So just say like any school district, to make certain that they understand that we're there to help them if there's anything, whether it's around food services, transportation, they're held responsible. But at the same time, we're there in partnership, and then also as an authority through the Department of Ed, our Office of Portfolio, to make certain that they are following the guidelines, make certain that they are following the rules. So if we hear of an operator that's not acting in the spirit of the one app system, where we can, and we do serve notices to them, which could ultimately affect them when it comes to renewal and extensions. And so, we're able to wear different hats and understand clearly where our roles lay. And so, like, the main oversight and monitoring is done through the department, but we're also there to be someone to be supportive, to bring to the attention of the operators if it's something that they need reinforcement on, to work with their boards. I mean, there's many layers to this. So it's not a lot of things just working in isolation and sitting back and watching it. It's more us being proactive and working towards solutions and understanding together.
It just appears to me that it's a duplication of effort when we have a state board, a state superintendent, and then you have the charter management groups, and they run independent of I don't know just how much control that you have over them.
Okay.
So that's my opinion.
Thank you for sharing it.
I'm just listening to Mr. Dilbar's comments. After reading the law, the Recovery School District was not intended to be permanent. It was intended to come in to help schools that were failing, and in return to allow those schools into the local school district. However, what I've seen since I've been on this board is that the Recovery School District has not done much greater than what the traditional public school system are doing. But not only just to say that, you made 3 comments. One was equity and fairness. I mean, I was so disheartened to see what I've heard last 2 weeks ago at the RSD meeting. The one-app process, it's not working in New Orleans. It's not working. And for me, I wish you guys can go back to attendance zones. I mean, just to hear those parents cry out. And then I hear the team of RSD will come to us and give us all of this information. But when we attend the meetings in New Orleans, it's not working. And the parents, they want help. And we're saying that we're giving them equity, we're giving them fairness. But you have a child that live on the East Bank and we're busing them way to the West Bank because of the one-app process. 3 siblings are going to one school, and then we have another sibling that's going to a totally different school so far away from home. So for me, I think I agree with Ms. Beebe. I think that it's duplication of services. And what is our job as a board or LDOE? That's what responsibility of LDOE to over. Their job is to do the oversight for the traditional schools and the private and parochial schools. So it's like we have created a school district, meaning RSD, and we have created our own identity of regards how we want RSD to be moved forward. And it was never intended to be long-term. So I don't know what Superintendent White, what we can do as a board to ensure that, I mean, all the money that we're spending in the Recovery School District, I agree with the lady, we can be spending in other areas. And I don't know how we can look into trying to phase RSD out, because most of the schools in New Orleans, well, all of the schools in New Orleans are chartered. We only have 7 schools here in Baton Rouge. So, I mean, I think the department as a whole can really maintain that. Well, what are your thoughts on that, Superintendent White? From a perspective of the superintendent of LDOE?
To me, it's very simple. The Recovery School District is the fastest improving school system in the state. And the good news about doing that is that's exactly what, as you stated, the law charges the RSD with doing, which is getting schools to a point of returning. There have
They're
now
not
been
returning.
situations where a number of schools have had the choice to return, and the Orleans Parish School Board has had the choice to accept them to return. That hasn't yet happened, both because schools haven't sought to return and because the Orleans Parish School Board hasn't sought to take them back. But look, I think we're getting there. It's been 3 years almost since OPSB has had a permanent superintendent. I think they're getting close. Hopefully when they get that in place, they'll be able to articulate plans for bringing schools back, and once that gets done, this process will go forward. But look, Orleans Parish used to be the lowest performing school system in the state. Now when you combine OPSB, which has done some good work, RSD, which has done some good work, you have one of the fastest moving school systems in the state. RSD on its own is the fastest moving in the state. That's progress that we should be celebrating, not something to criticize. And I think you'll hear today that our efforts to work together are only going to increase things and moving in the right direction.
Ms. Bophy?
I just wanted to say how much I appreciate you spelling out what we're looking at in terms of the operating funds. And I see that like 19.6 million there, and then the construction being 194.3 million. The tour was very helpful. I appreciate the RSD and Ms. Orange Jones for making sure that that was possible. It was helpful to see. I know we get the reports, and I know this is the overview, and that we'll continue to go back to this. But it was helpful to see how what the construction looks like when it's finished, and then the different phases that you guys have. So I appreciate the explanation and the information you provided today.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. Superintendent, I think you probably told us this on the tour, but can you tell me how many building projects we still have left to complete and are refurbished or revitalized or whatever the master plan will now encompass?
I believe the number is, I'll get the actual number from you, so I believe it's around 35. We still have that, but if Lona says she has the exact number, we can get it to you.
Meaning that they're still in motion.
They're still in motion, yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the vision, so when we talk about, I'm trying to look at the budget and understand that this is a little new to me, but so some of the money comes from state general fund and some of it comes from the dollars following students in your budget there on page 89. What's the explanation of, so no money from state general fund goes for salaries? If I'm looking at page 89.
Let me see. Yeah, so the state general fund, okay. Yeah, the 3.7 million, what we get from state general fund, that's just a subsidy from legacy costs. So that's inclusive of ORM insurance, unemployment benefits, health insurance benefits, those things that were sort of, when the RSD had a very large number of direct run schools, it's been phased down over a number of years.
So that's actually an appropriate line item in the budget?
Yes, ma'am. Go.
Well, just to be clear, it's originally state general fund, then it becomes MFP. There's 2.75 per the law that's, excuse me, not 2.75, there's 1.75 per the law that's held back from MFP. So, and Superintendent Dobar, tell me if I'm reading this correctly. The reason it's not listed as state general fund is it is much of that, for example, is interagency transfer that originates in MFP.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So again, in line, what's your vision of how long the RSD, how long has it been in existence, and what's your idea of how long it needs to be in existence for oversight, et cetera?
Yeah, well, I look at it as, well, one, we would need to get through the work that we've been charged with on the facilities master plan. And so just to answer your question, we have, previous question, we have 80% of our projects underway, 20 projects completed, 26 under construction, and 19 in design. And there's another 16 project, or another 20% coming up, and hope to have all those completed by the end of 2016. When you talk about the length of like RSD, in particularly in New Orleans, one of the things that, I've said consistently is that we feel like we're in long-term governance right now. And the charter operators that have been eligible, that Superintendent White just alluded to, for the last 3 years, there have been a number of schools that's eligible to return. And they could pass a motion at any time to go back under the governance of OPSB. None has exercised that as of yet. And in part, it's still waiting to see what the leadership will look like at OPSB. Having a superintendent, I think, will help that. But then also for OPSB to define how they view and how they will work with operators as far as thinking of those things around equity and how to continue to support as we have from the state's perspective. And so the RSD, we're just going to continue to do the work that's required for the children that's being served in our schools. And then we'll let those powers that be help to determine when it's a time. So those operators, if they start going back to OPSB and there's less and less of a need for us to continue to help lead, then we'll follow that. I don't think it's as like black and white as just say by this date, because a lot of it is in the hands, as it should be, but operators who's earned that ability to determine what governance looks like. And again, we're helping to set up and establish, and doesn't feel like it has to be us running anything as far as the long-term deferred maintenance. You know, we talked to you about on the trip about how we're going to keep these buildings in the shape, 100 years from now. And we just want to continue to work and do that. And then as schools determine it's time for them to come back because, one, they see clear leadership at OPSB, they see a clear plan of support for them that in the way that we've laid out, I think that'll happen organically.
Well, let me ask you this, Superintendent. I know, and I know these are huge building projects, and I know oversight is a big deal. And there has been some concern about faulty concrete and that sort of issue. So in oversight, what's the time limit on, is there a time limit on that kind of thing when we find problems?
No, well, the buildings, there's a surety on buildings and facilities. So one, we constantly work with contractors, and we have our project manager, Jacob CSRS, and our legal, where we can hold, within a certain time frame, we hold contractors responsible. So if there's a crack or something in foundation, as happens in new buildings, just regardless, whether it's schools or not, it's just an unfortunate thing that happens in the industry. We have the mechanisms to address that, and we do address that. And so all those things are in place. We feel like we're very solidly covered. And so whatever the legal surety extension or time frame is with any school district, it's continuously the same with us. And so we address that. I think the biggest thing, too, is we've built into like our charter management agreements with our operators. They're very clear and we've well defined what's the responsibility of the schools. So if you see a crack in the wall, like, you immediately report, which they're doing, and we start working on how to remediate that. And if it's still under the window, again, with the surety, if it's 2 years out, we can address that and have contractors manage it. If not, with the schools, they have the proper insurance and the ways to go about that. And so we aggressively and actively deal with that. It's a monitoring, I believe, biannually with our teams that go in and look at the schools and ensure health and safety, but as well as making sure that these schools are being built at a standard that's going to be long-lasting.
Yeah, and so are they reporting that to y'all in a timely manner?
Yes, ma'am. And we have, our team will go out from the state, and we'll just continue to push that. And even after we came back from the trip, we immediately sent out, and I followed up, my team followed up, just to make certain in how the process goes with that. And so, and I've also, shared with my team, let's make certain that we just keep that extra eye in. It could be people in, enrollment, walk into school to do something, and just tell them, still look at the facility. And if you see something, or bring it to the operator's attention. And so everyone's working together on that. We're being very mindful, but we do have a process in place that these things are being addressed, where you won't see a crack in a building and it's not addressed for 2 or 3 years. It will be addressed.
Okay, so the good news is they are reporting it, and so what we saw on the tour was something that y'all weren't aware of maybe until we brought it to your attention?
Well, no, I believe the team did tell me that they were working with the school and had been notified. I wasn't personally aware at the time, on the tour, and you see those things. But our team is in constant contact with the operators, and again, we have individuals that go out and will monitor the schools biannually. Now, they're not monitoring them every day, but we will have, they are in the schools consistently and be able to look at and just check for those things. But there are inspections that are done to ensure that all the buildings are being kept up and that everything is being reported in a timely manner for us to help.
And then y'all have been in touch with the contractor?
Yes, ma'am.
The concrete
yeah, if it's something around concrete and foundational testing, yes, ma'am, we're in contact.
Thanks.
Thank you for the questions.
Mr. Romer?
Mr. Garvey.
Yeah, a couple of questions, if I could, to Ms. Smith. Could you tell me where it was that you saw the cracks?
The
Cracks?
first school, it was at the Lakeview area where we all
Lake
met to
area
go on the
school,
tour.
yeah, Lake area.
And the stairwells, it was pointed out to us by an employee there. The stairwells had cracks running in. We have some pictures
So it was cracks in the stairwells.
along the walls in the stairwells.
Okay, I
And
spoke
the-
to Ms. Hankins this morning about the cracks that were seen in the stairwells. She said that they are covered under, I don't know if you call it warranty, but
Sure, it's here.
in essence, the warranty on the building. So.
Well, that was exactly what I was trying
That's
to
what I said,
get
yeah,
from the
and they're covered, yeah.
superintendent.
Exactly, and they're covered. That's what I said with the surety and through the
We
warranty.
want to make sure there's not structural damage, not
Right.
just cracks in the walls, but
Exactly.
does it go deeper than just, if we want them to last, as you said, 50 to 100 years,
Yes,
and we've
ma'am.
got cracks in 2 years.
And my understanding was it was cracks in the mortar, not cracks in the concrete. The mortar that is between the bricks.
That's correct. If you allow them to get a technical aspect on it, I don't want to misspeak. Yeah. Make sure it's time.
Yes, that's what it appears to me, is that the joints in the mortar. However, we've dispatched the architect of record and the structure engineer out, and as soon as we get that report, we'll share that with you guys.
Thank you.
But it wasn't a concrete issue that might have resulted from not testing concrete properly?
No, the building is on probably 4,080-foot piles. So the likelihood that there is a true structural problem in that building is rare because of engineers, and they are all conservative, and everything they design has a strong factor of safety, sometimes 2, sometimes 1.5 times the need. So engineers by nature are conservative. We're trained that way in school. So I doubt it's a structural problem.
We'll look forward to that report.
Yes.
I had another question.
Yes, Mr.
Following up on what Mr. Dobart mentioned earlier about charter schools and people in general in Orleans Parish waiting to see what's going to happen with the selection of a new permanent superintendent for Orleans Parish School Board. How long has it been since they've had a permanent superintendent?
I believe almost 3 years. Since, over
3 years?
2 years, yeah. Almost
Is that
3 years.
is that normal to have an interim, non-permanent superintendent serving for that long?
I don't believe it is, but I defer to others who may know more about state superintendency, search statewide superintendent.
I think this superintendent's position has been open for more than 2.5 years, which is certainly the longest of any parish in the state, and I don't recall any hearing of anything nearly that long.
That was going to be my next question. Are there any other parishes in the state that have an interim, non-permanent superintendent serving that long?
No.
Okay. Do you know what's holding things up?
But just from what I can glean from the papers, I mean, it's just like, it doesn't seem like they can get to a consensus on a candidate. And I don't know if that's because of, disagreements on vision or what have you, but I can't really speak for why they're having that difficulty, only from what I've been able to read.
And do you know what steps they're taking to correct the problems?
I believe they have a search firm that's continuing to try to vet candidates for them, and then they're in the process, but I think they have 2 candidates that still, I think, are technically eligible to maybe come to a vote, but they haven't brought those forward yet again. But other than that, I think they're still trying to vet candidates and come to a consensus.
Okay, if you could keep us updated on that, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll look closely.
Mr. Romer, I have one final.
Yes, Ms. Hill.
Mr. Dobart, in the last meeting, I requested for the original master plan. Just a few minutes ago, you alluded to finishing the projects that you guys were charged with under the master plan. Why haven't I received the original master plan, which I requested the original master?
We sent that to you yesterday.
Yesterday?
Yes, ma'am.
Before the board meeting today? Seriously? And I asked for that maybe 2-3 weeks ago?
We were putting together, also you wanted it broken out by wards, and so we needed to take...
No, the original, I asked for the original master plan.
Yes, ma'am.
And I also requested a breakdown by
wards.
ward.
Right, which we
But
needed
the-
to put that together.
But
and sent it to
the
you
original
as a
master
package.
plan should have been emailed 2 or 3 days later because it's already there. So, so that's unacceptable to give it to me a day before.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? There's a motion to approve, and there's been a second. Is there any objection to approval?
Object.
Was that Ms. Hill?
Ms. Hill?
And Dr. Beebe? No other objection, so moved. Next item.
On page 96, item 6.2, consideration of RSD contracts and leases of $50,000 and over. The recommendation is to approve.
Motion to approve by Ms. Bradford. So moved. Seconded by Mr. Garvey. We do have a comment card, and then I will see if board members have any questions or comments. Lee Barrios.
Lee Barrios, retired teacher, St. Tammany. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Dobard for giving the most comprehensive explanation and description of why it's so important for schools to be governed by a democratically elected school board. And I hope that that's what happens. Either the RSD schools go back to OPSB or there is another school board set up. But it's a contradiction to say that all these charters are autonomous and then have the need to have a school board which is not democratically elected, or a school system or governance system where the people actually don't have the input that they should have. The contract I'm concerned with is the Vergis Rome Architects contract for $37,754. And it appears that, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course, that this is for a designer fee only, and it's to design the remediation, or whatever you want to call it, of one classroom to be made into a science room. And I don't understand, first of all, unless there's something I don't know or don't understand, why in the plan for this school it wasn't included in the first place, and how much, if this is just for the designer fee to set up a science classroom, how much is it going to cost to actually provide everything that that science classroom needs? So I'm concerned that this is a continuous add-ons and amendments to these fees for these RSD schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrios. You're welcome to address that if you wish.
So the designer fees, we pay architects and engineers on the state fee scale that is set up by Facility Planning and Control. That fee scale is based on the total cost of construction. Total cost of construction of a science lab is typically about $200,000 to retrofit a science lab, put all the water, electrical, all of the infrastructure that is needed for a modern science lab, as well as vent fume hoods that is needed for modern science labs, and the cabinetry. So that is how the fee is arrived. As to why it wasn't in the original scope of work, this building was originally slated for renovation. We decided to quickly refurbish it as swing space for the elementary school across the street, so that those kids did not need to be bussed out of their neighborhood. And once we decided and you guys approved the refurbishment of this site, long term, the science lab was omitted because the school is returning back to a high school, so it needs a fully functioning science lab. The school did not flood pre-Katrina, but post-Katrina, this school was just suffering from deferred maintenance and probably hasn't had a science lab, a fully functioning science lab, since the 80s.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? I don't know either. Any objection to the motion to approve? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
Next item is
I'm
on
sorry
page.
about the. Y'all give us 1
Somebody
second.
else's
One try to
fault.
see it. Is it live?
Sorry about that. Your next item is item 6.3 on page 98, consideration of an update report on RSD capital projects. The department recommendation is to receive.
So moved.
Motion to receive and second by Ms. Bradford. I don't know if I know we had a recent update. I don't know if you want to give, is there additional update since last time you presented?
I just want to say yesterday was the first day of school for the kids who walked into the Wheatley building, and there were lots of smiling faces, and it seemed to go well.
We do have comment cards. I'll go to comment cards again and then allow board members, if you wish, to follow up. Lee Barrios.
Lee Barrios, retired teacher, St. Tammany. I just want to reiterate a couple of things that were brought out at the RSD meeting with regards to the master plan, and that's specifically regarding John McDonough High School, and I know we're going to discuss that in the next item, but as far as the construction is concerned, there are two items. One is for selective demolition, and I know that the public, the community is concerned about who or what the selection is going to be, what's going to be demolished. Will there be anything accidentally demolished that really doesn't need to be or shouldn't be, because they're hoping to get their school back. And it also says that for the high school renovation, and I think you all know or should know the story behind the promises of McDonough in the past, that it should already have been renovated or restored by now with the monies that Mr. White promised for it. But it says the design will start when the program issues are resolved. And let's hope that today those issues are resolved, and that you spoke about nobody's wanted to go back to the OPSB, and the OPSB hasn't asked for any back, but we have one here. And I don't think that's an accurate statement in the first place, but we do have one here. So I hope that these issues that are in this construction plan are turned over with the school to the OPSB so that that can be taken care of, because it's a wonderful school. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Buckley.
Thank you. My name is Frank Buckley. Lake Area High School, not only does it have cracks, there's wire. So there's a messing up with the wiring. It's not been wired correctly. If you all would have visited there when it was raining, you'd have seen 3 or 4 trash cans outside the office catching water from the roof. The school is only 4 years old and is having all these problems. Another concern I have is, we closed Reed, and now we're giving Reed to KIPP. That the reason for closing Reed, they said it was a failing school and there was no need to have a school in that area. And then we turn around and we give it to KIPP. I want to know, how many schools are we going to give to KIPP, and why KIPP is getting so many schools? Why? The community, we just trying to get one. KIPP have at least 10 now, and we just want to know why. Last concern is Andrew J. Bell. I keep bringing it up because there's not one high school or junior high school in the city of New Orleans that has a football stadium or a baseball field or a track. You go out to Metairie, they have them. You go to St. Tammany, it's there. You go to they have them in Baton Rouge, Texas, and Georgia. All this money, $10 billion came into this New Orleans, and we don't have one public or charter high school that has a stadium. Something is wrong with that. Why are we allowing people to design buildings that doesn't meet the needs of the community? But the people that are designing these buildings in their community, they have all this. Why our kids, our African American kids, can't have this? In order to play a football game, they have to go to Ted Romy or Pan America, where other schools are playing right there in their own stadium. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Harper Royal.
It was noted earlier that the New Orleans Public Schools used to be one of the lowest performing school districts in the state. Well, today the Orleans Parish School Board is one of the highest performing school districts in the state. But the master plan does not do a good enough job of recognizing that and giving them more buildings. If you look at your own data, you will see that loads and loads of students leave New Orleans East to go to OPSB high schools, McMain, McDonough 35 to be specific. But that should tell you to give Sarah T. Reed High School to the Orleans Parish School Board as a satellite for either one of those schools. It only makes common sense. The Recovery Schools District has consistently operated its buildings in a fashion that is just not conducive to learning. When AP Turo was closed at the end of this school year, the building issues were such that the Orleans Parish School Board had to put $1 million into that building just to bring it to code to put the new charter operator into that building. When you look at the John McDonough building, over the last 9 years, the building itself has been severely neglected. And on this document, it still says that program issues, the design for the new building will happen when program issues are resolved. I think that you had enough evidence of the failure of the Recovery School District in operating John McDonough specifically, and you've had enough evidence of the failure of the Recovery School District to choose a charter to operate John McDonough, that you know that you need to make sure that the program issues get resolved between today and tomorrow so that this building and this community and the children can get the kind of school facility that they deserve. In 2006 and 2007, you had lots of children come here to this very room from John McDonough High School talking to you about the building issues. And when that school closed, it was around building issues. It only makes sense that you do the right thing and give it back to the Orleans Parish School Board, a democratically elected body, to operate our schools. You've had your chance. The time is over for experimenting with our children's lives. You would not want this in your community. You would not want to have had the state fail your children over and over again over a 9-year period. You would not want that for your own. So don't continue to put that on us. Don't drag us through some ridiculous process when this community has come around this specific school. They've been coming to you since 2006 about this school. Please do the right thing for the children and the community of New Orleans. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. That concludes the comments from the audience on this item. Do board members have any questions or comments? Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
On page 154, item 6.4, consideration of the process for selecting a future governing authority for John McDonough High School to include Orleans Parish School Board. This was added to the agenda by Ms. Hill. The recommendation is to receive.
Motion to receive by Ms. Bradford, seconded by Mr. Garvey. Ms. Hill, I'll let you, and I know the superintendent wants to speak as well.
Okay, yes. I requested the item on the agenda via, can you hear? Okay, via community concerns and responses in regards to John McDonough. We did have the opportunity to visit John McDonough when we did the RSD tour in New Orleans. That evening we had the RSD meeting, and the community came out overwhelmingly to speak in regards to the issue with John McDonough. I do know that OPSB approved a resolution to allow the school to return to OPSB along with the FEMA dollars. And so the reason why I placed this item on the agenda, I was very instrumental with the Perry Walker and Landry issue as well. And so Mr. Dobrow has stated several times throughout his statements that they're working together with OPSB and the community to return these schools. And here is an opportunity where the community wants the school to return to OPSB. OPSB is the third parish in the state of Louisiana that are doing tremendously well academically. So we need to give them kudos for that because they're doing a great job. And even though I'm not the representative of Orleans Parish, but I represent all children, I believe that we need to look into this matter more diligently and begin to allow these schools to return. RSD has a lot of projects. RSD has a lot of oversight. And what we've seen in New Orleans, which they only showed us some of the schools, but there's still a lot of schools that they're continually trying to rebuild, renovate, or refurbish. And here's an opportunity to lighten their load, to allow this school to return to OPSB, and to give the community a sense of letting their voice be heard. I mean, they sent us petitions, I think almost close to 5,000 alum and community members want the school to return to OPSB, and I'm quite sure all the board members received those petitions. So I will allow the superintendent to make his statement in the community, and then I'll make my motion to what I think should move forward, how we should move forward.
Members, I just want to talk a little bit about the background and the legalities of this. I'm also going to invite Denise, if you wouldn't mind joining. I do want to make sure that council is here just to validate what I'm saying, and I might ask you, Denise, to share a little bit. I think, Superintendent, you should also stay just first, talk this through as well. This school was formerly an Orleans Parish building and school. It was taken after Katrina under the governance of the state. It was not in the master plan in 2011, and that's an important part of this. It was not in the master plan. Superintendent Darrell Kilbert of the Orleans Parish School Board, Superintendent Dobard, and I agreed to place it in the master plan and have dedicated upwards of $30 million in the master plan that you then ratified in 2011 to put it in, which we all, I think everyone agrees, is a positive step. In the time since, unlike with many of the other schools, the Recovery School District has not been as successful as we would like in turning it around, and so we now have a building that is going to be renovated, but we do not have a school. And so here's where the question of legalities is going to come in. This board does not oversee facilities issues. This board does not make decisions per the law about facilities assignments in New Orleans or Baton Rouge or anywhere else. It does not make decisions about how to do renovations and those kinds of things. Expressly in the law, those responsibilities are assigned to the department and to the Recovery School District. So a vote to return the building to different ownership or different governance is not possible. That's spelled out in the law. However, you do make decisions about specific school organizations and whether or not they should be returned from the RSD to the Orleans Parish School Board. That is an issue of a site code. There is not currently a site code in existence or inhabiting this building. Thus, there's really not a decision legally about who owns this school building, who has the rights and obligations of ownership. Those things are spelled out very specifically in the law. Now, that does not mean that Orleans Parish School Board and the RSD aren't going to work together on making a determination as to what site code inhabits that building, and thus who governs that building. And as both Superintendent Dobard and I said in a letter to you yesterday, and a couple of different letters, we actually think there probably are a number of scenarios in which Orleans Parish is the right governor of the site code in that building. Again, the land underneath that building is owned by the Orleans Parish School Board. They own the real estate. That's in the law. There's no decision about that here. The rights and obligations to operate that school building is under the Louisiana Department of Education and the RSD. There's no decision to be made about that here. There will be a decision that Superintendent Dobard, Interim Superintendent Smith, I see we have Board Member Thomas here today. These bodies will be considering about which site code, which school inhabits that building. And I think we all probably agree that there are a number of scenarios in which the right site code is an Orleans Parish site code. There's a whole set of reasons for that get into the complexities of the master plan. But I wanted you, Mr. Chairman, to be advised of the legal issues. Denise, did I cover the main points? Is there anything you would add to that? Okay, if you would stay there just in case the board is interested in counsel. And I'd be interested, Superintendent Dobard, in hearing about the status of those discussions with OPSB, any plans for going forward as well.
Yes, and thank you, Superintendent. And so, as recent as yesterday, I talked to leadership from the Orleans Parish School Board and expressed, our desire to work cooperatively with them on a process with the community to determine the long-term siting or the long-term operation of that facility. Fully committing to continue the renovation, which we will. And for us, it's not about a matter of just governance. What really matters most is that as we come together to a solution on this with OPSB, is that we look at, again, the demographics, which we shared with you all 2 weeks ago, making certain that we're mindful of our student populations, of our needs, of our revenues, and just how we continue to look at holistically what's best for a system of schools in New Orleans. And so firmly stress that to the leadership and different individuals on the OPSB board. And, they were receptive, like hearing, and I know they're here, they can speak for themselves, but that's where we are. So we're hopeful today that we could continue on that path in a very meaningful way with clearly identified leadership that's working for OPSB as ours is, and take those things into consideration to make certain that it's a school on one of our main thoroughfares that's serving all of our children, that's one that's open to all children in New Orleans, but it also doesn't exasperate any issues we may have around enrollment needs, as well as it fits fully to be able to help us realize our goal of every student in a new or renovated facility. And so we're committed to that, and we're going to continue to commit to that and work through it. And I just would also add, like the school, we won't have a building open until 2 years. We have time to work through this, and I think we've seen in other areas where we've been able to do that, where at times people didn't feel like we could come to an agreement and an understanding. But I think when you have clearly defined objectives, as long as with clearly defined parameters that we need to work in, being responsible stewards of limited resources, that we can ultimately get there. And I pledge our full support to work with the OPSB and stakeholders in order to actualize on something fantastic for the John McDonough facility.
Board members, before I go to your questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and go to public comment, if you don't mind. Maybe staying there or just one step back would be fine. We do have a fairly large number of comment cards. I'm going to ask you to try to be brief if possible, and I'll limit you to 2 minutes. I certainly will give you a little grace, but let's do our best to try to get through these in a somewhat orderly manner. I'll start off with Ira Thomas. And I'll go ahead and call 2 at a time since there's a few more, and Lee Barrios will be next.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Mr. White, Superintendent. We're here this morning, I'm here this morning, rather, representing the Orleans Parish School Board in support of the resolution that our board passed at our last board business meeting in support of the community's desire to have the John McDonough 35 building returned to the control of the Orleans Parish School Board. I listened carefully to Superintendent White's comments on the legal issues here, and since if that is the case, we did not come to get into a legal battle with the RSD or this board about the school building. Our position is to support what the community would like for us to do. Superintendent Dobard mentioned that he spoke with the leadership of our board, and that he and I also had lengthy conversations on yesterday. And we also talked about a process that's in place with respect to the Reed High School building. And it's an open, transparent process where the community, and this is what I emphasize, that's important about that process, is that the community, all of the community stakeholders, the educational stakeholders, and the Reed High School building is in my district. And we do have representation from the Orleans Parish School Board, our school district, to represent us on the board. And this process is to allow the community, the stakeholders, to decide what type of school is going to be in the Reed High School building and who the operator is going to be. So if we can put the same process in place, Superintendent Dobard, with respect to John McDonough, and allow the community and its stakeholders, not for us, OPSB or RSD, to decide, but let the stakeholders decide what type of school should be in that building and who the operator would be. I think it's a fair process that brings everybody to the table. and allow their voices to be heard in the decision for that school, for John Mack, to be based upon that kind of input.
Appreciate your comments.
Mr. Rowe?
Oh, Mr. Garvey.
Some questions, if it's okay. You were suggesting that the process that was used for Reed be used for the John McDonough School?
Correct. The Reed process is just underway. You know, the RSD is taking the lead on that. OPSB does have representation as part of that group.
Okay. With that in mind, are you saying that you are supportive of Superintendent Dobard's proposal this morning of convening a group to look at what to do with John McDonough?
As I understand and appreciated Superintendent Dobard's position last 2 weeks ago at your meeting in New Orleans, his final comment was that the RSD would decide and make a determination as to who to operate and what type of school after getting community input. What I'm asking here today, as I appreciate the Reed process, is that RSD is not going to make that decision, nor will OPSB, but rather the community and community stakeholders. And so I see that as a fair process in allowing the community and stakeholders to tell us, you know, what they would like to see done in the Reed High School building. So conversely, if we can do the same with respect to the John Mack building, I think is a fair process and a way to go exactly, if I'm not misunderstanding anything, Patrick, about the Reed process.
Let me just speak to that because there's just one slight difference. So with the Reed process, Reed is a school in New Orleans East where the facility is not under anything for long term in the master plan. And so this doesn't, and then also the demographics fit out there for whether it could be a high school, it could be a OPSB high school, RSD high school, or elementary school. And so with that, it doesn't have the same constraints because there's a need for either or out there to have the community work with us on ultimately what we would decide. And so that's what's going on. We're working closely with the Vail community, and Dana Peterson's leading that work. The difference with the John Mack facility is because there are different demographics, as well as this is in the master plan. And I would say that I'm committed to working with, we set those parameters. So because quite honestly, to be responsible at the John Mack facility, it can't be that wide open as far as it can be anything, because you literally have a school 3 blocks down the street that's scheduled for a renovation that we're committed to. And then you also have a high school that he mentioned, I think McDonough 35, which is what Mr. Thomas about was 6 to 8 blocks away, right? And then we still have those schools in that area that's committed for renovations in the master plan. So that's why we're saying that there should be some parameters around that. But other than that, to have the dialogue, and I think us as governing entities to be responsible steward of taxpayers' dollars, and knowing that sometimes you have to put some limitations on what's able to do. That's the difference between the Reed, but I appreciate the fact that, you know, Mr. Thomas is recognizing, and he expressed it, and we said like everything checked off the box where we could go through with the process that we're doing in Reed, where we don't exasperate seat situations. It's not in the master plan as far as long-term renovation or anything on that facility. This facility is a little bit different, so it's like apples to oranges, but it's all still something that process with clearly defined parameters can see us through both of these.
Mr. Chairman. To follow up on that, during this process that Mr. Dobar is talking about, who is it at OPSB that would be the contact person for him to talk to about issues that may arise? Would it be the president of the school board? Would it be the interim superintendent? Or who would it be?
You know, the superintendent would be the ultimate person responsible for responding to these kinds of issues. The board would direct the superintendent, and Dr. Armand Devazan was designated by the superintendent as our liaison to the Reed process.
So if he has a question and he addresses it to the superintendent and the superintendent gives him an answer, he can rely on that answer?
Well, that depends.
So he can't rely on an answer from the superintendent, the interim superintendent?
Well, again, it depends. The superintendent doesn't have total autonomy to make all decisions. Some things do have to come to our board.
But he knows, the superintendent would know that, right?
Yes.
So the superintendent, if you could rely on him, would answer, Patrick, I have to go to the board to get an answer that I need from the board.
Correct.
Have you known your superintendent to give answers that require to go to the board without going to the board?
I plead the fifth on that one.
What's the purpose of
I think that points out one of the problems here is that getting a straight answer on some questions sometimes is impossible to do, because he can't rely on what comes from the superintendent because of what you just said, but yet he needs someone like the superintendent to be there to answer questions. Well, let's just understand, or just put that aside with the understanding that there are potential problems with this. But along the lines of the superintendent, can you tell me where the superintendent search stands? What is the status? We were talking about it earlier, and Mr. Dobart couldn't give us any answers, but maybe you were closer to the
If
issue.
I may, and I appreciate your questions, we're going to move, we're going to stick to this, item. And I know your concern is there not being a superintendent in place for this process, but, I don't want to confuse the two, Mr. Garvey, if that's okay. And
Sure.
we do have a number of other board members who've asked to speak, and then we have a number of questions. Now, you're welcome to answer his question, Mr. Thomas, if you want, but I just told him not to ask it, so.
And I agree with you. I'd be glad to talk with Mr. Garvey if he wants to talk about that. But if I can just add this, as Superintendent Dobart mentioned, the demographics. The one app that our schools participate in, the notion of demographics in the location of schools is really inconsequential, because students, the one app is supposed to provide choice for parents, so irrespective of the location of schools. And so last year, our numbers in one app clearly, the data clearly indicated to us that we need the opportunity to expand our direct run schools. We saw applications for students wanting to attend our direct run high schools well into the thousands. 700 for McDonald 35, another 900 at McMain, and we only had a few seats to fill. What the community, and those who I've been talking to, the John Mack community, is interested in seeing John McDonald High School return to that location, in a high school that provides the full gamut of programs that most charter schools in New Orleans do not have, like football. A student wants to play football, the schools are limited. A student who wants to play basketball, those schools are limited because most of the charter schools don't provide those type of programs. Instrumental music, vocal music, and the other programs, other extracurricular activities that students like to participate in,
we do have
to get a well-rounded education. So
several of the board members, I think, had questions perhaps of you, so I want to give them a chance, and then also go to the other audience members. If that's okay. I'm going to start. Ms. Orange-Jones.
I think most of it's been covered. Just want to say, Mr. Thomas, thank you for being here. Appreciate your leadership and your perspective on this. It does sound as though there has been some conversation since our last committee of the whole meeting, specifically between yourself and the superintendent, about a potential process that would enable OPSB to very much be at the table, which is essential, but also ensure that community voice is heard, and that the RSD, of course, can also play a role. That you feel fairly confident that that is possible. Yes, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure.
I believe Dr. Morandi, had you wanted to speak?
Well, I am most appreciative of the dialogue for sure, and the future of John Mack, because I certainly am looking forward to seeing that vibrant and continuing. I'm just wondering if rather than this fall on Superintendent Dobar, if it could not be a more collaborative process where they putting together a group of people, the constituents and those that have a real commitment to this, that they come back and tell us what that composite's going to be and what that process is going to be, how many open meetings are they going to have, how much input they could get, what is the time frame for coming back to make that recommendation, because we certainly don't want to use up these 2 years deciding the governing authority. If we can get that in place, then we can see that we could spend the rest of that time getting ready to open John Mack.
Mr. Dobart, if I may, Superintendent Dobart, do you have any comment in regard to what Dr. Moranti just said in terms of timing, et cetera, you know, how the process would work? I know you outlined
Yes.
Broad parameters, but
We did. So we outlined the broad parameters and said we would have several, public type meetings over the next several months. I think specificity and clarity for what you're saying, Ms. Miranda, Dr. Miranda, would probably be most helpful, because it becomes very, from our perspective, the RSD's perspective, like we literally reached out, but then after I got from one group that just basically their spokesperson just sent the question instead of, I'm saying, well, when can we start a planning meeting, get together? I just responded with, are you going to give the building back? And so I understand that they want to make it through this part of the process. But then I would think that we would need to work with OPSB as well as have an understanding when we define community, like how will we set that up? So is the community like literally folks who live like in the Esplanade Treme area? Or is it the larger New Orleans community that we're thinking about because we're trying to solve more for demographics? And I'm open to all of that. Like we're open to all of that. And I think if we just clearly define, I think as you said, the individuals, the role, the process, which we define the process as gathering the information around revenue, costs, student demographic projections, facility needs in the area, capacity, and then use that as the framing for a group to come together around and say, okay, looking at all these things, and if we agree that all these things are as we place to you, then I think that process will lead us to then, what's the quality school option that we would like to see in the building, and then go from there. It might be an existing school. It may be a new charter school. Those things. It could be K-8. It could be high school. But I think if there are individuals or if it's a strong feeling, depending on, I guess, how this plays out today, that there's just an absolute, it has to be a John Mack High School, versus no, there can be a conversation, it could be a number of things, and this is the process, not excluding that, but including other things, then we can lay that out. But I would want to be very definitive, again, because then ultimately it will come down, I think as Mr. Garvey was trying to point out, who's the leadership that can speak definitively saying, yes, we respect these boundaries, and these are who the people that OPSB thinks should be in the room. This is what RSD lists. This is what community lists. How is that defined? And we work through a process on that. I think we can get there. It's going to take time. I think we can do that readily over the next 8 months and to come with an end by that time. Because we also have to keep in mind, we have to get to design on this facility. Now, we can design a facility general enough that it could fit whatever we may want to put in there. But the more that we can get to conclusion on what we agree together that should be there, I think that's the way to go, and expediency is the matter. But we propose the end of January to be able to do it. If it takes a little bit longer, that's fine. We can sit with OPSB to lay that out for the board, and then maybe get that to you as we see that we could fulfill on it.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I really wish y'all would have had that meeting before we stayed from 6 until 11:30 that night in New Orleans. So I guess maybe y'all have come to some agreement since that meeting. But I have some concerns about who's going to be driving the train, really. I do. Maybe I'm looking here at this particular legal opinion. It's on Louisiana Department of Education letterhead. So I'm assuming at some point BESE's not driving the train. We don't have any authority to, it seems, according to this, now I'm not convinced totally that we don't have a vote on this, but I'm just perplexed that we're here at this point. And if I'm not mistaken, when you talk about the stakeholders and community, your school board is the elected representative in that area. Is that true?
That's correct.
Last time I checked. So I'm just trying to do, when I sat and listened for 6 hours of testimony, and I'm assuming that you went back and talked to those same stakeholders, and then you're now recommending, so you would not be in favor of a motion for John McDonough to come back over under the school board at this point?
No, I am definitely in favor of the John McDonough School Building returning to OPSB. If I appreciate the explanation given by Superintendent White that legally, if this board does not have the authority to do that, I don't know whether or not that's accurate what he has stated. But if I'm to accept that, then this board can't vote in order that the John McDonough building be returned back to OPSB. If you can do that, then certainly that's what our resolution simply speaks to, the return of that school building. What I am saying, if what Superintendent White has stated to this board prevails, then certainly we are, the OPSB, are willing to work with the RSD in the same fashion which we've put a process in place for the Reed High School building that will allow the community and stakeholders a voice at the table. It will be a transparent process that not the RSD, not Orleans Parish School Board would decide what type of school goes in that building and who the operator will be, but that process will determine that. So I'm in support of that. Should this board, and say if the position of this board is that it does not have the authority to return the building.
Excuse me for interrupting, but could we ask the lady with the legal opinion to come back? I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Yes. Just give me a brief explanation of what BESE can and cannot do with regard to a school system, a school wanting to go back under the Orleans Parish School Board.
No, double check your.
I didn't see the light. In this case, this is a facility. I'm going to distinguish between school and facility. You don't have a school operating in it, so it's a facility. So it's under RSD's complete control. They decide they decide how to renovate it, what to do.
I understand that. I'm just saying, you're saying it's your legal opinion that BESE has no vote on whether a school can go back under the Orleans Parish School Board?
Yes, in this instance, yes.
Again, we're not talking about a school organization, we're talking about a school facility, and the law makes very specific distinctions between the three. Let me just walk them through again so the board has this.
All right.
The underlying property is owned by the Orleans Parish School Board. The law establishes that the RSD and BESE, for very specific purposes, construction of new facilities and so on, has control over facilities, the rights and obligations of owning the facility. The landlord is the Recovery School District under the law. The decision as to whether or not a school organization, meaning the thing that gets a letter grade put on it, the thing that receives money, the organization of people, goes back to the goes back to the Orleans Parish School Board, that is a BESE decision. And BESE has put in rules years ago as to how that happens. Meaning, when we say a school, we need to distinguish between, are we talking about the school organization going back, or are we talking about this facility being one that the Orleans Parish School Board is the landlord for? Now, in the past, in fact, just as recently as 3 or 4 months ago, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Marshall, the board president, the interim superintendent, and the Recovery School District created an agreement where they said, well, that building would better be run by Orleans Parish, this building would better be run by the RSD, and they worked those issues through. And that's happening more and more. I think essentially what we're saying today is, given the roles of both groups, let's do that again. And as I said, I actually believe there are a number of scenarios where the right answer here is for Orleans Parish to govern this building. But it's something that we need the ability to work through rather than a definitive black and white board vote, either this side or this side, which really isn't going to get us to a legal answer or to the right answer.
I'm going to continue with comment cards, if I may. Appreciate Ms. Barrios, I believe.
B. Barrios, retired teacher, St. Tammany. It is so obvious, not only to the people that have been trying to get this school back and this school open into a viable school, regardless of whether it was a charter or a traditional school. The RSD has not only failed, but miserably failed. The last time being when they brought in Finn. Should have known, or probably didn't know, what we all knew about Steve Barr and that charter organization, and yet they brought it in. They allowed those children to be put on national television. There should be no reason for this school to stay under the authority of RSD, number one. Mr. Garvey, your attempts to malign the Orleans Parish School Board are so obvious, and thank you, Mr. Romer, for nipping that in the bud. It's been one stall, one promise after the other for these people to have their school back. Orleans Parish School Board wants the school back. Those schools all belong to the Orleans Parish School Board before the hurricane. And that's when they have been stolen from the community, from the parents, from the students. It's a failing school system. I cannot see to have one excuse after the other. Went to the RSD and the people expected and were told that they could come to BESE and they could get a decision. Now they're being told, no, it's Mr. Dobard's decision. Mr. Dobard sounds like he wants to control the whole state. He wants to, once the school is given back, he wants to make sure that the Orleans Parish School Board runs it properly. This is outrageous, and I don't even live in New Orleans. I would hope that you people would stop this and do what you are supposed to do, what you're legally supposed to do, and stop taking these lies. I can't characterize them any other way than lies and stalls about this school. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Harper Royal and Frank Buckley. I can. I'll go ahead and call a couple more. Shawan Bernard and Walter Goodwin.
What difference will this proposed community engagement process, how will it be different this time? We have been through process after process after process around school after school, only to be told that the RSD is going to do it the way they want to do it, and the community voice has been ignored. Why should I believe it this time? The other thing, Attorney Willie Zander sent all of you a letter that kind of outlined some legal issues. Do we really want to get into a legal battle over this, over what's right, over the Recovery School District controlling something that they've proven they can't do well? We shouldn't even have to go there, but you already have a letter from an attorney, and, you know, I guess if necessary, we could get into a legal battle. Superintendent Dobart mentioned demographics. Well, we know proximity of schools doesn't matter in New Orleans because we don't have neighborhood schools. That shouldn't be an issue. If you're worried about exacerbating enrollment issues or the number of seats, that's easy. Do not approve any more charter high schools in New Orleans. That's real easy. You say you don't need any more, don't approve any more. And we'll see how this really shakes out. There have been multiple steering committees, multiple community groups who all want that to be a high school. There are plans in place that were financed by even the Walton Foundation. Y'all like the Walton Foundation. They financed the steering committee to put plans in place. You have over 500 people on a petition. We don't need an 8-month process. That sounds very nebulous. The building, in your own documents, the design of the building cannot move forward until the program issues are resolved. Do we really want to wait 8 more months to resolve those program issues? That doesn't make sense. We need to get that building designed and moving forward. And so I just ask that you, if Superintendent White and Mr. Dobart can make that decision, Give the school back. It's the only right thing to do if that is the case. But I, like Ms. Smith, don't believe that BESE plays no role. But if it is that simple, give the school back and trust the elected board and respect community members to make the decision about what should happen with that school. It really is that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Royal. I can't remember the order that I called everybody.
Frank Buckley. I've given you a copy of the master plan that I've read. And it stated at the end of the 2014 school year, John McDonald would close and go back to OPS, and OPS can do what they want. That's what your master plan is stated. Now today, it's like you're saying, don't worry about that master plan, we're making up another decision. John White, as the superintendent of the Recovery School District, you told John McDonald community that we had to go charter in order to get $34 million to renovate the school. You, in turn, bought Steve Boyd from California to run the school in the ground. You got on a Digger Fell show and said that John McDonald would become the first culinary art school, and that didn't happen. When Futures Now took over John McDonald, it had a 70 SPS score. When Future is now left, it had a 9 5/10 SPS score. RSD failed it directly. They failed it as a charter. Why are we still playing games with RSD? We are tired of seeing what our children are going through in New Orleans. They are hurting people because they are hurting. Hurt people hurt people. Give this community an opportunity to run a school. Just give us one. We asking for one school in our community, and we've been asking for the past 8 years. All RSD has done was fail. Now, I'm going to say this and I'm going to get up. BESE, you all have the power to fire John White. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to try another approach. We've been giving you data, statistics, you know the numbers. I'll just tell you one more piece of data that I researched with the 2013 data with high schools. The Recovery School District, 33% of their schools received an A, B, or C. Orleans Parish School Board, 88% received an A, B, or C. John McDonald needs to go back and operate under Orleans Parish School Board. But I want to give you an analogy about what this whole thing is. I have a child who attends public high school in Orleans Parish. She does not attend the RSD schools. We went with OPSB. And I had to explain. She wanted to know why I kept fighting for John McDonald. And I said it's like the BESE board is the guardian of this. There was a basketball game I did an analogy of, and the basketball was taken. And the basketball was taken because this person was injured. And 8 years later, this person is now healthy, and he is saying, I want my basketball back. And you gave the basketball away with Act 35. You gave it and created this bully of the playground, the RSD. And they refuse to give it back, regardless of what you say, regardless of what we say. We have two people who are hired, and they're bent on doing what they want to do regardless. I say vote, pass it, and if they want to file a lawsuit to stop it, let them file that lawsuit against the people who hired them. We must take action today. We want the school back today, not 8 weeks from now, not 6 months from now, today. Last time I spoke with you all, I asked that you resolve whatever issue. We come today, I would love to know, get a copy of that letter that was given to you. What law did they read? Because I read the same law. You got an interpretation of the law that we said can give the school back. So I don't know what law they quoted, but I would love to know what number that is, what revised statute that is, to get another opinion, because mine just don't agree with that. But after 8 years, the person, the school district, Orleans Parish, they're healthy. They're saying, give us the school back. And yet the bully sits here today and say, oh, you who gave me the authority can't make me give it back? That sounds unreasonable, people. I don't know what's going on, but it needs to be worked out. Pass the resolution. Force them to tell you no. They've been telling us no for 8 years. I've been at the table. 3 different committees have worked with the RSD, and regardless of what that community says, they do what they want to do, and it is not in the best interest of children.
Thank you.
32% of high schools operated under the Recovery School District have an A, B, and C. That means 67% are failing.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin.
Mr. President, members of the board. My name is Walter Goodwin, and I'm a father, grandfather, Vietnam veteran, citizen of New Orleans, and a former principal of John McDonald High School. The future is now. The charter group hand-selected by then Superintendent John White and approved by this board to operate John McDonough was the coup de grace for our community. If what has been happening at John Mack is what the future holds for our children, then their future is hopeless. I, on the other hand, have great expectations for our children, and jail is not one. Based on the efforts of FINS and the RSD direct-run schools, they are creating a pipeline to prison. Here's the roadmap. 32 security counselors and 3 school resource officers for 900 students instead of social workers, counselors, and mental health workers to treat the students' PTSD immediately after the storm. Instead of being treated for their PTSD, suspensions were the rule rather than the exception. Many were just told to go home with no documentation. These kids were living, many of them in unbearable conditions. The school that they had to attend was unbearable, but they came every day. They came every day. Police were making arrests for school infractions, making criminals out of our children. The RSD superintendent continues to lie to this community today. With a 9.3 SPS, I see no hope and no future. They continue to blame the victims, the children and the parents for the problems. We talk about choice. Well, whose choice is it for us to have our school? Is it the parent, the child, the school board, the taxpayer? We wonder why the crime problem is out of hand in New Orleans. The reason is the educational problem is out of hand. There are many of these students, teachers, came down here for monetary reasons. As well intended as they are, they have caused great harm and irreversible harm to our students. I came to this board back in '07 with the Fire Youth Squad, and back then we were told, trust us, we'll get it right this time, you just wait and see. Here I am 7 years later asking you again to do the right thing by these children. Enough mental, psychological, physical, and educational damage has been done in the name of reform. You've hijacked our democracy in New Orleans, where the elected board, along with the school community, is asking for the school back. We find ourselves without representation. My tax dollars and many other tax dollars help pay for those buildings. The BESE conducted a public hearing in New Orleans relative to whether the school should be continued in the Recovery School District. I'm bringing it to a close right now.
Absolutely, thank you.
Continued in the Recovery School District or return to the Orleans Parish School Board. Our community, speaking in one voice, overwhelmingly says return to John McDonough to the Orleans Parish School Board. By a majority vote of this board, it will be decided whether or not John Mack will continue or return to the Orleans Parish School Board. The question is not whether you can return to school, but whether will you. There's no operator. There are no students. Do the right thing and listen to the voices of the community. We are exercising our democratic right of choice as citizens of New Orleans, and we choose the OPSB to govern our school, and not the RSD.
Thank you. I don't know if did I call your name?
You did not, but I signed the call. I have a brief statement. My name is Donald Chopin.
Okay, I will get to it. I'm going to pull you out since you're here, Donald Chopin. I'm going to call a few others real quick to join you, if that's okay. Elizabeth Jeffers. Brianna Odell, maybe? O'Neill, I'm sorry. And Brenda Square. Mr. Chopin.
My statement is very passionate. I'm a parent and grandparent.
If you don't mind pulling the microphone closer, please, sir.
My station is very passionate. I'm a parent and a grandparent. I have kids that have gone to Orleans Parish School. I now have a teenager from a second marriage, teenager, a granddaughter that's in Orleans Parish School. John Mack is about 5 blocks from my house. I'm here because I fully recognize my responsibility as a parent and grandparent. Those are my kids that I send to your school. But ultimately, I'm responsible for them and their education. You got a choice to keep. You're part of the BESE board. You have a charge to keep. You're over our educational system in this whole state. And what you did 9 years ago, you categorically denied us through calculation and machinations the right to educate ourselves. It was done behind our back, over our head, and under our feet. But you did that. We were an experiment. Nobody in the state but New Orleans was under the guise of a RSD. It started in New Orleans. It was designed for New Orleans. It worked so well in New Orleans until it spread like a cancer to other parts of the state. But this is what you did. You reduced our children to dollar signs. We had a system of school board members that was really pitiful. The people that we elected was not doing a good job for us, and for that they are responsible. You took advantage of that situation and brought in a whole new game plan by taking away our responsibility to govern ourselves and school ourselves. And they did it for the sake of money. Our children became a portfolio. In fact, RSD grades itself and structures itself based on portfolio. The second highest paid person in RSD, I don't know what he makes, is the person over portfolio, because our children are dollar signs. Not about education, it's about dollars. So your charge is to get past the charade, because you have the responsibility to dismantle what you started. You took it away, only you can give it back. And it should be given back no later than tomorrow at that board meeting.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Chopin. Elizabeth Jeffers.
Good morning. Hi, I came here to tell you about my experience with the process we went through at John McDonough when the RSD first took over. As you see, we had a protest, and Brianna here was a student at John McDonough during the time, called Take It to the Top. The students' demands, you'll see statements by the students, which Brianna will tell you a little bit more about. Lack of special education services, no IEPs whatsoever. Children who hadn't passed the 8th grade leap, who should have been in 8th grade, were sitting in my English 3 class, and when they were tested, they were reading on a 2nd grade level. The children were reading, but no accommodations that we had, the RSD. The children had to do a press conference just to get IEPs. The classrooms were overpacked. 50 kids in a class, 56. Frozen bologna sandwiches, broken water fountains, bathrooms with no doors. So we would meet at John McDonough, Brenda Square, Brianna O'Neill, Mr. Goodwin, and Attorney Zanders, who you received a letter from recently, which we can get copies for you as well. So we came, and we would stay every Wednesday night till 10 o'clock at night, creating a plan and working with the RSD. We had a strategic plan, phase 1 for the John McDonough Public School planning process. We met with Superintendent Robin Jarvis, Paul Vallis, and whatnot. We had an MOU with the RSD. We met with them. We met with Jim Liu of the Walton Family Foundation. But we still do not have have any say in our school. And I would like that you read through Mr. Zanders' legal advice, where he says that BESE has the authority to it shall supervise and control the public elementary and secondary schools and special schools under its jurisdiction. The board shall have the power to supervise, manage, and operate or provide for the supervision, management, and operation of a public elementary or secondary school which has been determined to be failing. So under Louisiana law, BESE has the authority to vote. We don't want a process. We had been through a process. We want to vote for John McDonough to come back to Orleans Parish School Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jeffers.
Excuse me, Mr. Rome, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just have a question. You said that we have, do you have the law that states that we have the?
I'll hand you what Mr. Zanders, Attorney Zanders.
Okay, please do.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I'll go to the next speaker. Ms. O'Neill.
Hi, as Ms. Elizabeth said, I was a student at John Mack, and I remember sitting in this exact same spot 7 years ago asking for the same thing, asking that our school be ran by Orleans Public School District. One, because when we came back, like, we was lied to. We told that we was going to have better schools, the best education that anything can buy, and what we had was the worst that I have ever seen in my lifetime. My life has been terribly horrible since being pushed out of John McDonald Senior High School for coming sit and talk to you all about how to fix our schools. We had made plans, we had several meetings, we had protests, we did everything in our power to get our schools better, and because of it, we got pushed out. Every person that was in our youth group had to get sent to another school or had to get GEDs because our school did not want us in our school to try to fix things that was going on. Our recovery school district did not allow my mother to come in the school to see what was going on while I was getting sicker and sicker every day from being in a school that had like horrible conditions in it. We had nothing that we needed. And now 7 years later, I'm still asking for my school to be turned back over to me, to my community, to my family. I shouldn't have to sit up here and beg for something that belongs to me to be returned back to me. It has they have numbers, you have visits, everything is showing that RSD is failing this school, while OPS is gradually going back up in numbers. OPS went through the same thing that everybody in New Orleans went through, but yet still coming out on top. RSD has not been through anything we have been through, and yet they still failing. So why is it such a hard decision to be like, give them back what they own? This is ours. And then they're taking the culture out of our schools. They're telling us we can't have basketball, we can't have football, we can't do volleyball, we can't do this. But what you can do is you can make sure you pass this test so we can get more money in our pocket so you can go and work for the tourist industry. I don't want to do that. I have one of my teachers, Ms. Jeffers, and another one of my teachers who are Orleans Parish School teachers, have found me and made sure that I'm on the right track. And now to this day, because of those teachers who was fired and removed from their schools as well as us, have made sure that I'm in college on the road to own my own nursery. Because I believe that it's going to start from the children. And you're going to have more generations coming here. But by tomorrow, I would like to be able to transfer my son back to a school that is owned by us, that I know I can go and check on him. I know I can make sure he's doing his work right. I can work with the teachers. I can call them. I want that culture back. I want my school back. I want to be able to know that there's a generation coming up behind me that has the best education and not failing. Isn't that why y'all took over anyway? Y'all said we was failing. So why is this failing school allowed to continue to fail?
I appreciate your comments. Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Ms. Square.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I must say that I'm disappointed that the board would come this morning and say to us that you do not have the legal authority to do the vote. I'm really shocked. But you see, I can't help remembering so many instances in our history when people have said to us, people of color, African Americans, that the law does not allow you to move forward. You cannot have what you want. You cannot have what other citizens of this country have. You cannot have equality, parity, economic opportunity, educational opportunity because of the law. Now, we've worked for nearly 300 years in bondage. For this state, we built it, our people. We had the law impose bondage on us. We came out of slavery, then we endured Jim Crow, a separate education system. And the children of New Orleans, children of color in New Orleans, have always historically had the worst educational opportunities in this state. So you as BESE board members have to deal with that history. And let's not pretend that is not part of the heritage of this state. Coming out of Katrina, you had a community in crisis. And our good legislators empowered you to come down and help our city, rebuild our community. And we've endured the RSD. We have endured them. We have survived the RSD. We have come with documentation of their neglect over and over and over. We've not heard this committee at all address the lack of accountability, the exploitation of our children at John McDonough High School, and yet they sit in authority, and you tell us today that they have to be involved in the dialogue to restore this school. When is there going to be an equal standard of justice for the children of New Orleans? How is it that they could be put on national television, that you could have a charter operator who's not explain all of the money that has gone into that school? There's no accountability. And then to have a grade of a 9 at the end. But yet, this community is being told once again that the law prohibits that school from being returned to Orleans Parish. Well, if BESE can sell buildings in New Orleans, and we've seen the auction school buildings in the newspaper.
Ms. Square, I'm going to ask you to try to wrap it up, please.
Okay, I just want to say, if they can sell buildings to private companies and individuals, then they certainly have the authority to give a school back to the community which owns it. We're not enslaved anymore, members. You have the authority. Do it. Let's see what the court says afterward. Take the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Angelina Elder, Debbie Sachs, Anne Marie Canello, and Kenneth Gill.
Good morning, board. My name is Angelina Elder, 84 alumni. My son graduated in 2011 from John McDonough. My daughter graduated in 2013. It's not about BESE. It's not about the state. It's about our children. It's about John McDonough, the man who's the school named after. I did a research on him. I read his legacy. He was a man of God. He had so many buildings, so many businesses. He had schools in New Orleans, and he had schools in Baltimore. He said, he stated in his will, respect him in spirit. Respect him in spirit. Remember, we live in a city with spirits. And I'm working with a spiritual on me right now. He gave so much and did so much. And Mahalia Jackson is one of his schools. He said free public schools for all. It's in his will. It's in his will. If y'all don't give it back to John McDonough schools to Orleans Parish, all Orleans Parish schools that's ran by charter schools, the people go make y'all give it back. Because y'all allowed charter to come here. Charter ain't nothing but the Turkish. The Turkish, y'all didn't let nobody know from New Orleans. Y'all could have let us know from the newspaper or anything. Charter is messing over our children. Our children at these bus stops, coming home in the dark and going to school in the dark. That's unreal. That's insane. That's insane. But if y'all don't change this, I'll be leading the way. We're going to change this. Y'all going to give us back all our schools. John McDonough children was in mold. I did a 5 to 6 year investigation. I took over 1,000 and something pictures. Unreal, white mold, black mold. I kept reporting it to RSD. I reported it to the state. I had the DEQ in there. I called everybody. I even called the historical people for the buildings. It was just unreal. Y'all gonna give it back. The people gonna make y'all give it back. You ever heard of a wall, a revolution wall? It's gonna be a revolution of education. We're going to get back what's rightfully ours, and I mean it.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Anne Marie Coviello. I have 23 years of teaching experience in New Orleans, 15 of them in public schools. I have a master's degree in education from the University of California, Berkeley. I currently teach at Ridgewood Preparatory School and Tulane University, and I became involved in this effort 3 years ago, hoping that I would be able to make a difference after I had been fired from Orleans Parish School Board with 8,000 other teachers. And I joined the ranks of these people who have said in no uncertain terms how long they worked, and they are an amazing group of people, and I'm very honored to be part of them. And so many, many years before I came on board, they were trying to get the school to be a successful place for children. And when I came on board, I was very naive, and we thought, well, charter is the reality here. So, in fact, I had several email exchanges with John White at that time. We were both Teach for America former core members. And, we were just told so many things. And we believed some of them enough to say, let us be part of the community that will listen to this persuasion and go with the charter and try to work with the charter to make a good school. And we believe the charter operator futures now really was based on the community. When we got involved, we saw something different. They wanted to form a community advisory board. It was under the conditions of the I-3 grant. The federal money was $800,000, and they needed to show that they had a community advisory board in order to get that money. We spent hours working on an MOU and bylaws, which were actually worth nothing. So my time was wasted, and so many others were wasted. And what we found was that the charter operator was using the I-3 grant to back pay people that never worked with a child in New Orleans, didn't even live in New Orleans. They used the I-3 grant to enrich themselves, paying the principal $300,000 over 2 years. And the charter operator himself, Steve Barr, was paid over $500,000 in 2 years to operate the school where he didn't live in the city. He was rarely there. He didn't interact with children at all. So when they decided to close the school, they really showed us how they negotiate and how they work with the community. Mr. Dobar keeps talking about process, but what was the process for telling these two boards? There was an executive board and an advisory board made up of community members. They didn't even tell us the school was closing. Parents, Ms. Gilbert and Mr. Gill, were not told the school was closing. The boards were not told the school was closing. Yet you want us to work with you in good faith. Mr. Dobart and Mr. Peterson want a process. Well, it's been said many times already. We've been through a process. Please don't waste our time anymore. Mr. Peterson, Dana Peterson, looked me in the face and said, I don't want to work with you, when we were trying to determine what was going to happen next. I don't want to work with you, but you're asking us to believe that the RSD that allowed this waste of time and money, not to mention, as Ms. Gilbert said, the unbelievable disruption in the lives of these children, some of our very most vulnerable children in New Orleans, are told, go find another school. We're through with you here. It didn't work. Sorry. Go away. Find something else. So many of those children were overage. I was very honored to get to know some of the kids as being around in the advisory board. Where are they now? And what is the RSD doing for those children to follow up? Please don't give them any more chance to hurt children and parents and community members.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Gill?
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Gill, graduate of John McDonough, 1985. I'm currently the alumni president of John McDonough. I will start with Hurricane Katrina. Since then, the RSD took over John McDonough. It has been a disaster. Disaster after disaster. No books, no cafeteria. Lunch was being brought in for kids. The elevator didn't work. Nothing was being prepared. One app was a disaster. The worst of the worst kids was put at the school. The better kids went to better schools, and the kids who didn't have nowhere to go, they sent them to John McDonough. How are you going to succeed? Then, 2010, you put another high school in there with John McDonough, who's already struggling. Then you put overage kids, Renew, in there with John McDonough, and now you got two schools battling one another. So, during the 2010-2011 school year, they decided that Mr. White decided the school want to go charter. It wasn't a process. He said either go charter or close down. I didn't want my school to close down, so me as the alumni president decided to work with Mr. White and Steve Barr. We're friends. We didn't want the charter schools that was in New Orleans that existed at that time, because none of them were doing well. Well, Mr. Gill, we have friends. Steve Barr is from California, this and such and such. I decided to put my 2 kids at John McDonough for the last 2 years. Utterly failure. And Mr. White, I believe you owe that to me, if nobody else, because I work with you. You said you wanted friends. I said, okay, we could work with the charter group. They failed us. They did absolutely nothing but made money. And I work with you personally. You didn't say it's going to be a process. We're going to see. We wanted to go to all these parish school board then, but I said, okay, we will try to go charter. We didn't really have an option at that time. Now we do. The school is closed. We're not taking it from a charter. We're not moving kids. We have 2 years to decide what we're going to do. In 2 years, you may not even be the state superintendent. Mr. Dobar may not even be superintendent of schools, maybe another governor. Well, we'll be another governor. So why not give us one school, just one? That's all we're asking for. We already know that Dana Peterson is working with the Clark alumni to bring First Line into Joe McDonough. We already know that. So the decision is already being made of what they want Joe McDonough to be. They don't want to go back to Orleans Parish. You want the state charter and bring Clark to Joe McDonough. One more thing.
Yes, sir.
Demographics. Joe McDonough is the only school in the central city. 35 is moving. That school won't be there. They're going on the lakefront. That school won't be there. Warren Easton is the other school. Can't know anybody get in Warren Easton. Clark is a small school. It was really an elementary school, and it became a high school. Joe McDonough is the only large school in that immediate area for miles. That's it, where any child can go to. So for you to say it shouldn't be it meant be elementary school or something else, that would be the only high school that exists in that area. That's it.
Mr. Gill.
So I say, give us the opportunity to work with Orleans Parish and be successful, because we have been failed for 9 years. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Ms. Sachs.
Debbie Sachs, St. Tammany Parish. What happens to John McDonough is concerning to every school district in this state. John McDonough today could be Mandeville High tomorrow, promoting unelected charter boards and replacing previously democratically elected ones. Diminishing the voices of parents and democracy is alarming. This is sad for me today. Unfortunately, during this last legislative session, a bill put forth by Representative Kenny Havard, which would have basically closed a loophole to prevent theft of public school buildings and the land that they sit upon, failed in House Ed Committee. John Mack needs to be given back to these people, and it needs to be given back to the Orleans Parish School Board in the best interest of the community and for the basic survival of the school itself. The decisions you make with respect to John Mack will be very telling of your intentions for the entire state. It's scary. Please respect the wishes of this community. Please, it will be a reflection of your own humanity. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. That concludes the public comments card. I know the superintendent wanted to say a few words, and I'll see what board members would like to do.
I would just say a couple of things. First of all, I agree with much of what was said. A couple of things. Number one, well before Katrina and after Katrina, John McDonough and its students have been failed. And you know, there's a lot of us who share responsibility. I'm certainly one of them. So no question about that. They deserve better. Secondly, I don't disagree that Orleans Parish could be the right organization to govern the school. It's really all about what the education plan is. We haven't heard much about that today. And I think we've just got to have a planning process. So I don't, we may have different perspectives, and maybe some people want something faster than others and so on, but as Superintendent Dobart said, this building won't be renovated for years. This is a gut renovation down to the studs of that building, so we've got some time. And I appreciate everything that was said today. I think a lot of it was right on the money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Warren-Jones.
I just want to say I think this is just a very important item, and I appreciate all of the public comment. For those of us who were in the committee of the whole meeting a couple weeks ago in New Orleans, there was the same amount of passion being put forward by members of the community, and I agree with the superintendent. I think this is a school that has been failed in the near future, in the very recent future, which has been our responsibility. It's a school that has been failed before then by OPSB before Katrina, and we know that we have a responsibility as a board to ensure that we do better for all the children who will be served in the future in this building, and so this has to be successful. We also know that the goal of the master facilities plan is to ensure that all children across our city, including at this site, have the opportunity to be in a new, renovated, refurbished building. I know that all of our children across the city of New Orleans deserve that. And I was very pleased today to see OPSB at the table, Mr. Thomas in particular, to express his desire on behalf of the board to really play a very active role in facilitating a process that does justice to the community voice, which is integral in this situation. We have to, the community is clear, and I think it's very important that the community voice is a critical part of this process. It's also clear that over the course of time, because of the specific history of this historic site, that there's been a tremendous amount of community mistrust. And so we're dealing with community mistrust amidst the need to really actually go through a process that ensures that we do end up with a academic model in this building that serves all children. And so the opportunity to have OPSB and the RSD collaborate in a way that actually does justice to the voice of community is very, very important, in my opinion. And so I want to offer an additional motion to facilitate the process of bringing in OPSB to be a part of a planning process that does justice to the community voice and begins to move towards the process of really articulating clearly what the academic program is that needs to be in this building that will eventually serve all children.
It needs to be, by the way, it needs to be a substitute motion because we have a motion on the floor. Which
I'd like to offer a substitute motion, and there are a few different components to it, if I might. I would like to, number one, I want to direct the RSD superintendent to meet with the Orleans Parish School superintendent. I think there's a real element of this to analyze revenue, costs, student demographic projections, facility, capacity needs of existing school programs in New Orleans to inform the RSD's decision related to the use and control of the John Mack High School facility. Number two, to directly instructing the RSD superintendent to pursue a process to work collaboratively with Orleans Parish School Board officials to engage Orleans Parish community members regarding the future use and control of John Mack High School facility. And finally, to be able to provide this board, which I do believe is accountable, obviously, for the superintendent's direct actions, to provide an update to the board on this matter at our October Administration Finance Committee meeting.
I second that motion.
Okay, there's a motion, there's a second. I believe it's been handed out, too, so everybody can review it. Ms. Hill?
Okay. Just for clarification for the board. Because one of the things that I have an issue with LDOE, they will give us information, and most of the time, the information they give us end up being inaccurate. So I pulled the law myself, and I think Ms. Smith asked the attorney in regards to what our powers as a BESE board to make a decision to close a school, to return a school, etc. So according to the Louisiana Revised Statute 17-1990, it states, under the revised statute, the transfer of OPS schools are to remain under RSD control for initial 5 years transfer term. The schools transferred to RSD in 2004 and 2005 will end their initial transfer term at the conclusion of 2011-2012 school year and will be subject to one of the following: closure, return to OPSB, or retain in RSD. According to Louisiana Revised Statute 1710.5, Louisiana Revised Statute 1710.7, it states, these statutes are clearly upon BESE to determine when and under what conditions and stipulations an RSD school is to be returned to the jurisdiction of a local school board. It is BESE that is tasked with the responsibility of reviewing the RSD recommendation and making decisions regarding the statute of each RSD school after the initial 5 years under the jurisdiction of RSD. However, the RSD made the decision to close John McDonald. They never had the recommendation come to the board for us to vote as a board to determine if we want the school to be closed. Because according to the law, in order for RSD to close a school, to return a school, or allow the school to remain in RSD, they must come to the board. And we are responsible for making that decision. RSD neglect to do that with John McDonald. So with that being said, Superintendent White, you said that it's an issue with the site code. To me, the site code is still under RSD because they never came to BESE to say that they wanted to close the school. So board members, you want to know our duties and our responsibilities. This is the law, and however we vote, you need to know that we are subject to the law, and that's why we are elected and appointed. I just wanted to make that clear. So with that being said, I know that Ms. Jones put a motion out there, but I would like to put a motion because RSD failed to follow the law to make the recommendation to BESE to close the school or to return the school or allow the school to remain in RSD. I make the substitute motion to let the school go back to OPSB.
You can't make a substitute to a substitute motion, so there is a substitute motion on the floor right now, and that's Ms. Orange Jones' motion.
Did we get a second to Ms. Jones's substitute?
Yeah, Dr. Moranti.
Okay, so it's already on the floor.
Any other board?
I have some comments, Mr. Romer,
Yes.
and I have been quiet. But here we have a community and representatives from a community, and I don't know what is with some of you. You know, here we say we're about educating children. Well, we have the support of parents here appealing and to the point of begging this board to do right by them. And then we have law, we have conflicting opinions. Who do we believe? I mean, I'm at a point, I don't know who to believe. I don't know what to vote on, what to vote against. I mean, this is ridiculous. And then, you know, these people came here today. They were very passionate. A few weeks ago when we were in New Orleans, they spoke. We had a meeting for approximately 5.5 hours. They made their case. And so, Superintendent White, I'm appealing to you. You know, I've told you months ago that you could lead us in the education community doing the right thing, but you have an agenda. There's no doubt in my mind and the opinions of many other people across this state. And what is happening in Louisiana today is likely going to happen in our communities. So let's do the right thing. And you know, Ms. Orange Jones, you're the representative. You should want to hear your constituents and do what they are asking you to do as their representative.
Excuse me, I'd like to respond to that. The fact is,
If I may, I will get, Mr. Garvey asked, I don't want us to get in a Q&A with each other. I will come to you next, Ms. Orange Jones.
Yes, I have a question
You can't even come to a meeting and be professional.
Excuse me, Ms. Beebe, a couple of questions for the superintendent. There was a poll done recently of the residents of Orleans Parish, I believe, if I remember right, asking them whether RSD schools should be returned to OPSB now or not now, but at a later undetermined date. Are you familiar with that poll?
I am.
Did it say that more people preferred not returning the schools now?
Yes.
More people. We have some people here who do not agree with that, I understand, but more people in Orleans Parish prefer to not return the schools right now. And can I ask you something else? Do you know what the school performance score for John Mack was
Just follow the law.
just prior to Katrina?
I don't have it on hand, but
I was told it was a 15. Does that sound right?
Sounds right.
15 out of, how many points would that have been?
200.
15 out of 200. The normal, so out of 100, that would be 7.5 out of 100. A score of 7.5 out of 100. Failing is usually 65 out of 100. Do you know what the failing rate of children in a school with a school performance score of 15 would be?
75%.
75% failing. That's what the school was before. Don't forget. That is what it was before. That's what we were dealing with. What is the average performing on grade level now in the RSD?
2/3.
66. So you have a 70% not performing on grade level before, 30% performing at grade level. Now you have 66% performing at grade level, a doubling. And that's what the RSD has accomplished in 9 years. And that's where John Mack was before we took it over. Just keep that in mind when you think about what we're doing. Thank you.
Please, please. Ms. Orange-Jones.
I want to clarify for the board. I think this is a school again that we have not served well. In the recent history, in the history before Katrina, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that we are thinking not only about the legal transferring of a facility, which of course is clear, but that there is also a plan in place to ensure that there's an academic program in the building that serves children well. And I believe that has to happen in partnership with our community, and I believe the fact that OPSB has come to the table and said that they are willing to facilitate a process in partnership with the community, not just RSD operating in isolation, but a real process that actually enables us to achieve the goal of ensuring our children get what they deserve is what I'm advocating for, which is in the best interest of our school and obviously listening carefully to what our community is also saying.
But Mr. Roma, I just want to add that we cannot forget that we are here and we are charged to follow the law. And regardless of how we feel, what we think, the law is the law. And it states, and I've read it clearly, and I would give everybody a copy. However, RSD failed to do their job to recommend the school to be closed or to stay with RSD or return to OPSB. There's no way around that. Regardless of what a poll states, regardless of what anyone says, we need to get the community involved, we failed to do that. And now you guys are telling us, according to what the legal opinion, you're telling us that we don't have the right. The right was never brought to us. So that's what I'm saying, Ms. Jones.
If I make just a practical suggestion from an education perspective here. No one on the RSD side or on the side of those who have come to the table to advocate today has talked about what exactly the plan is for the kids. And that's fine. We're a long ways away from that, from the time when we have to get there. A decision today by the RSD, by OPSB, by this board, that's a big drastic decision about this should go back or this should not go back, really underestimates how complicated this process is and how the impact of this will have ripple effects across dozens of other schools. Let me just give you some perspective. This project costs $40 million. This school, if it's rebuilt for 100 years, will serve tens of thousands of kids. Making a decision at this moment about whether it should go back or not go back, no one's being asked to do that. We are saying it could well be OPSB. That could be the right suggestion. You haven't heard that come out of my mouth very often. It could be the RSD. This is a system of 90 different school buildings, and this has huge ripple effects. The best thing is to commit to a process, hold us accountable, keep us coming back to report and update to you, working with OPSB,
Audience, please.
and we'll do that.
Audience, I'm going to ask you to please, we've allowed everybody to speak, and we're going to allow everybody up here to finish speaking. And this is, board members, I will remind you, I want to limit the number of times we speak, okay? So if you want to speak again, I'm putting everybody on notice now. Make your final comments, please. Ms. Orange-Jones.
I just want to make sure we can clarify to Ms. Hill's point about, I just want clarification from the superintendent. My understanding is that Futures now gave back their charter. They actually, that there was not a formal decision. I'd like to know formally what actually happened.
They turned in their charter.
They turned in their charter. In that case, does Ms. Hill's point about the law?
That's right. In other words, there was no action taken by this board or the department. They surrendered their charter. They severed the contract.
We have a motion and we have a second. Roll call vote, please.
And tell me what we're voting on?
Yes, Mr. Lee, I'm
Can
sorry.
I get a little bit of clarity of what is the motion?
Yeah, why don't we reread the motion, if we can? And Ms. Orange-Jones, you can reread it if you'd like, or we're going to have
okay.
add it.
It's her
It's
motion?
Ms. Orange-Jones' motion, which is actually in front of you. I'm sorry, Mr. Lee. Why don't we read it again? Let's read it again.
Okay, a motion, second by Ms. Orange-Jones, made by Ms. Orange-Jones, second by Dr. Moranti, that the Administration and Finance Committee recommends that the board request the RSD superintendent to, 1, meet with the Orleans Parish Schools superintendent to analyze revenue costs, student demographic projections, and facility and capacity needs of existing school programs in Orleans Parish to inform the RSD's decision related to the use and control of the John McDonald High School facility. 2, to pursue a process to work collaboratively with the Orleans Parish School Board officials to engage with Orleans Parish community members regarding the future use and control of the John McDonald High School facility. And 3, provide an update to the board on this matter at the October Administration and Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you.
And Mr. Romer, I want to make an observation. Here we have a handwritten copy of a motion submitted by Ms. Orange-Jones. If this is not premeditated, if you will, this is pre-planned, and I'm not supporting anything. I think I'm...
May I respond?
Let me not.
No, guys, I appreciate it. We're not going to go back and forth with personal comments. And I think Ms. Jones did this for everybody's ability to read it, and we're not going to go back and forth on that.
How did she know the course of discussion, Mr. Romer?
She knew the agenda item, Ms. Beebe, and I'm not going to go back and forth. I'm not going to have members going back and forth with each other. Okay, there is a motion, there's a second, and we'll take a roll call vote on that motion.
Can we just, I'm not
Okay.
trying to delay.
Yes.
But I do need to get a little bit of information.
Yes, Mr. Lee, I'll allow that.
What's that?
No, Mr. Lee, I had a question.
The school is closed right now. The building is closed.
Yes, sir.
It's not functioning.
No, and it will be closed for a minimum of 2 years. To
Okay.
be the facility to be gut renovated.
So the children are attending other schools today,
There are no children enrolled in the school. The school does not exist.
but the children in that community, I assume,
Yes,
are
yes, sir.
attending other schools.
They are fully enrolled in other schools. Yes, sir.
And you're saying it would take a year to renovate the school?
It's going to take roughly 6 months for the design process and roughly another year and a half for the full renovation. In other words, it is being gutted. So in other words, there will be nothing in the building, no plumbing, no drywall, no electrical. It will all be gutted, and it will be only the facade of the building will remain.
If we followed the desire of some board members to turn it back over to Orleans today, to the Orleans School Board, they still could not open the facility for 2 years. Is that accurate?
No one could open the facility for another 2 years.
And if this board voted to turn it back to the school board, where would they get their funding from when they did open it? Would the funding automatically be there to operate the school?
No. That would have to be, this is what I'm saying, is there are all these details that go so far beyond what our discussion has discussed today.
The funding will come from
I do think there is a circumstance where through a planning process, you could say, okay, this is the right school organization to go in this building. These are the right dollars to follow that. This is the number of kids who will go there. In light of that, here's what the ripple effect is for the entirety of your budget. mean, this is not news to you in Caddo or anywhere else. Here's what the ripple effect is in terms of student enrollment. Here's what the ripple effect is in terms of demographics and so on. But those factors go well beyond the discussion that we're having here today.
And I guess maybe what I'm injecting into this discussion, looks like there does need to be some planning time for both the renovation of the facility, but also the operation of the facility, and that planning needs to start occurring now. At the time planning occurs, there could be reports back to this board to determine who the school will belong to.
Yes.
Those decisions, those recommendations, the transition could be made back to the Orleans School Board. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
With the planning that needs to occur now, the cooperation that needs to occur now between RSD and the Orleans School Board, could those discussions, could that cooperation include recommendations coming back to this board that could say they would recommend it be transitioned back to the Orleans School Board?
Yes, yes. I think that actually is a good possibility as I think through what the potential options are.
And this motion, even though I know you said you didn't want to allow any discussion on this, I think Ms. Beebe made a good point about this being a tight motion, but it does look like it provides for some planning time, some transition time, some decision-making time that needs to occur prior to any final decision being made today.
Members, I'm going to recognize Ms. Smith. She's been very quiet on this item. Ms. Orange-Jones, since it's your motion, I'm going to allow you to close.
Okay, thank
And then
you.
we're going to have a vote. All right. Ms. Smith.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm trying to understand if the RSD would transfer John McDonough today, we're saying the dollars disappear?
I'm saying that this is a $2 billion budget, and just that we need to understand what the ripple of, in other words, both organizations manage a piece of that budget. Both organizations manage a piece of the enrollment citywide, and both organizations manage certain buildings. I agree that if you transfer a building to another organization, it would be obviously ideal to transfer the dollars. But both organizations are going to have a difference of opinion as to what dollars that should be. It's going to be proportionate to the enrollment. But is it selective enrollment? Is it magnet enrollment? Is it open enrollment? All of those things are going to have, is it career and technical education, are going to have a major effect and be a ripple from the decision that we're trying we ultimately need to make. Now, we have a lot of time to make it. So yes, I think things are in New Orleans are transferring back and forth between these two governance entities. I'm suggesting I think it's better to allow that some time.
Even if there's a time, say, until January before anything happens, if in fact it did happen, they're not losing dollars. I think that's a misconception. They're not going to lose dollars if the school transfers back to the Orleans Parish School Board. How would they lose dollars?
I don't think anyone's
The money follows the student.
I don't think anyone's going to lose dollars.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Ms. Orange-Jones.
Board members, just want to have the opportunity, again, this is not about tit for tat, but at the same time, I think it's very important that we're able to look at this situation that has a huge impact on a community that has suffered, a population of students that have suffered, and recognize that this is not the first time that we've had this discussion. We started this discussion in public several weeks ago at a committee of the whole meeting where we heard hours of public testimony, and clearly that is the same testament that's being brought forth today. And so there's been more than enough time, and I've engaged, of course, this is my district, I've engaged with many of the community members, many of the district players that are involved in this, to the point that this is not the first time that we've heard this. Therefore, I've thought about this, and I do believe that bringing OPSB into the conversation is integral, right? And I believe this motion begins that process. I'm also suggesting that it's incredibly important and incumbent upon us to consider what the academic program is in the building, because that is ultimately how we are going to impact the children that we're responsible for. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and we have a second. We have a roll call vote, please.
Dr. Beebe?
No.
Dr. Beebe votes no. Ms. Bofi?
Yes.
Ms. Bofi votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Mr. Gio is not in attendance. Ms. Hill?
No.
Ms. Hill votes no. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Dr. Moranti?
Yes.
Dr. Moranti votes yes. Ms. Orange-Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange-Jones votes yes. Ms. Smith?
No.
Ms. Smith votes no. Mr. Romer, would you like to vote?
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. Motion passed.
Thank you.
Substitute motion.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that this report that comes back in October include whatever discussion has occurred toward a possible transition to the Orleans School Board?
Sure, I think that's fine. Mr. Superintendent Dobart, are you comfortable with that report?
We're happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Whatever discussion has occurred.
Thank you. Next item.
Excuse me, can we have a motion to receive this update? There was a motion in Ms. Brackett?
Okay, the motion, the original motion to receive Mrs. Hill's is still, motion to receive, and there was a second. Any objection to receiving the report? Yeah, the substitute, I think, overrules the receive. We're all right. Yeah, we're all right. Yeah. Next item.
On page 157, item 8.1, consideration of a legislative update. The recommendation is to receive.
There's a motion by Mr. Garvey to receive. There's a second by Ms. Bofi. We do have a comment card. Ms. Barrios? She passes. Does anybody object? Any further comment? Is there any objection to receiving? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
On page 162, item 9.1, consideration of the Minimum Foundation Program Task Force. The recommendations are to approve and to receive.
So moved. Second.
What's that? Motion. There's a motion and a second. Is there any comment?
Yes, I do. I have a comment.
Yes, Ms. Hill.
I'd like to know the individuals that were nominated, what was the process and how were their names nominated? Did we go through an application process? I'm just curious to know how were the names selected?
Members, if maybe I will answer Ms. Hill's question with an overall comment. What you have in front of you today is effectively a re-recommendation, a revisiting of this task force. This task force was, as you'll recall, committed to by the board in February of 2013. It was chaired by Jay Gio. We ran a process over the course of June to December 2013, ended up producing a set of recommendations that carried through the MFP that was passed for the first time in several years this spring. So it was a highly successful thing. In doing it, we promulgated policy that expanded dual enrollment and career technical education, as well as expanded funding for students with disabilities, and increased the MFP by 2.75% at a base rate. There are two things that I want to call your attention to, and one of them Ms. Hill identified. One is that the focus areas for the task force are obviously going to be different. I see Representative Ed Price in the background on the Education Committee. They voiced, both in the House Education Committee and in the Senate, a set of recommendations for us to focus on in a variety of ways, and I'd like to talk with you about them. First, Senator Dan Claytor continued to emphasize the need for resolution on the studying of the funding for students with disabilities. I believe that that process is well in motion, but a significant percentage of this MFP task force time is going to be consumed discussing the state's funding formula for students with disabilities, and you see that on the schedule. Second, Representative Walt Leger, Senator Eric LaFleur, and Senator Mike Walsworth require that we study early childhood funding and its relationship to the overall education funding. And third, Representative Jim Fannin requested a continued study, including work with the legislative auditor, of how the MFP count is done, how the mechanics of those things are done. What you then have today is not just that schedule and those topics, but proposed recommendations regarding membership. The seats that are voting seats, on this committee do not change. The majority of them are organizations or types of individuals to be appointed, and thus the appointing power is to specific sets of individuals. We have added, out of constant conversation with the Special Education Advisory Panel, with the Non-Public School Commission, we have added non-voting members to the group, so the overall group, in terms of special education directors and in terms of representative from the non-public school community, does get bigger. But the number of voting members remains the same, and the makeup of the committee remains the same. Now, there have been changes in many respects. People have left their jobs, people have left their committee positions, and so on, so these things change. But the number of voting positions and the appointing power behind those voting positions does not change. If that answers, Ms. Hill, your question, if there are specific appointments or types of appointments that I can speak to, I'd be happy to.
Mr. Roma,
Yes.
has a motion been made?
Yes, there's been a motion to approve and receive.
I'd like to make a substitute motion to include the Louisiana Association of School Business Officials in the task force as a voting member, because after all, we're dealing with finance, and who would better know what concerns and how to effectively communicate those concerns. So I think we need to include within this framework the representative from the school business officials.
If I might respond, first of all, I would, I think actually I agree with Dr. Beebe, much of what she said. From an advisory perspective, it was a very positive decision to include the LASBO representative last year. If you remember, you made that as an amendment. I believe it might have actually been your motion, Dr. Beebe. And I think all of us who participate in the process, looking back, think that Jim Malone from St. Charles Parish made a very favorable contribution, and frankly was very persuasive. However, our rule of thumb this year was to bring back to you, given the successes of the task force, a recommendation that the voting members and the size of the group stay the same. And if you look at it, effectively what you have is we don't have all of the professional associations as voting members. In other words, I believe you could make just as compelling a case for business officers as you could for the special education directors and other professional organizations that represent specific positions within the central offices of school districts. We did add the Louisiana Association of Special Education Administrators, however, as an example, as a non-voting member, as their advisory capacity, their seat at the table, their influence is absolutely critical. But to continue adding voting members when we already have quite a sizable group seems not like something that we thought we should bring to you. But we did make that change of adding LACIA to the non-voting members. So that was the rationale. Just try to keep it constant, keep the number constant, keep the appointments constant, but add specific non-voting members.
Well,
I'll second her motion.
Okay. I think that would actually be an amendment. I mean, does it matter if it's an amendment or does it matter if it's a substitute? Yeah, it can be a substitute. That'd be fine if we'll do it as a substitute. Dr. Moranti.
The only, it's very, very minor, and I don't even know if it would call for any kind of a motion, but for the non-public school, just to have chair or designee.
Chair or designee, and I believe that is our intent. My apologies, yeah.
We do have comment cards, so before we proceed, I will go to comment cards. Lee Barrios. Ashley McReynolds.
Good morning. Quickly, just wanted to thank the Department Superintendent White for the opportunity, if I am voted on as a member of the task force, that I'm definitely looking forward to contributing to the conversations and hopefully bringing forth an equitable funding formula for students with disabilities across the state. So I just wanted to thank you for the addition and hopefully a positive vote.
Thank you. Danny Garrett.
Danny Garrett. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm representing the Louisiana School Board Association. My card is marked as information because I marked it before Ms. Beebe made her motion. So actually, I guess you amend it to be I will be in support of her substitute motion. Having attended all of the meetings last time, and I agree, Jim Malone's in-depth knowledge of school finance had such a great ability to educate the members, and I do. I work with him on a regular basis, and I can tell you, I think that adding the school business officials as a voting member will recognize what they brought to the table last time and engage them even further in this process, particularly since the specific topics that this task force are being asked to look at are so financial in nature. I think they serve a similar role as to having a principal there. Principal gives you that school level view. The superintendents give you that overall view. It is a very narrow view, that finance, because the school boards and superintendents come up with policies, and ultimately they just turn to their left and ask their finance officials to figure out how to pay for them. And I think that it would be a positive step to add the school business officials as a voting member. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other comment cards. Members, are there any other questions or comments? Ms. Boki?
I just want to know what time the meetings are going to start, and I also want to point out that it looks like the special ed conversation is the same day that we have a SEEP meeting, so we may have to work on our calendars a little bit.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? There's a substitute motion on the floor by Dr. Beebe, seconded by Mrs. Hill. That substitute motion was to move the Louisiana Association of School Business Official nominee to a voting member. Did I state that correctly, Dr. Beebe?
Yes.
But it's also to receive and approve the remainder of the recommendation. Is that correct as well?
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
You're welcome to.
Let me. If there's a feeling of concern that the school business officers should be on the committee, what I would suggest as an alternate arrangement would be that there be an additional representative then made as a voting representative. The reason I say that is that if you added the school board officer, you would have 22. We cannot have an even number on the committee, and what I would then request in managing it is that the early childhood group be added as a voting member as well, as there is no representation for early childhood on the committee otherwise. I believe if those two were added, then we would have a favorable solution to what Dr. Beebe raises.
So since Dr. Beebe's motion currently is a substitute, she'd either have to agree to amend her substitute to reflect that, or we'd have to vote on the substitute and perhaps either pass it or consider an alternative. Dr. Beebe, are you amenable to amending? And Ms. Bradford, you can speak.
I want to say, it is my opinion that when we just have two people that are serving in a non-voting position, we need to consider the possibilities that we include all of them as voting members.
I don't believe we could, just because I believe that the non-public school council's role is probably not appropriate for a number of reasons as a voting member on this group, and that would be our concern with that.
So why couldn't we do all of them?
Non-public doesn't need to be included on the funding place. Okay, well, I think I certainly see the importance of special education and early childhood. So couldn't we include the three groups, the school business officials, special education.
You're back to an
and-
even number if you do that. I think most committees try to stick to an odd number.
May I make another comment?
Yes.
We have added now a representative of La Teach to the voting members already.
Okay.
Also, one thing we might think about is because, for example, the business officers was a non-voting member last year, we're rotating them on as a voting member this year. Perhaps another way to think about the special education directors is, let's see how it goes this year, and then let's make this consideration next year, Dr. Beebe. Thus, we could bring those two on to satisfy your concern.
So, Dr. Beebe, are you willing to amend your motion to reflect the two
Yes.
new voting members? That would also now include Early Childhood Advisory Council?
Yes.
And Ms. Hill, do you still second that motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing none, so moved. That concludes our business. It is 5 till 1. We will start at 1:30. What's that? Oh, Mr. Garvey, you get to set the time. I apologize.
30 minutes from now.
Okay.